The mine tunnel, I used to think night shifts were the easiest gigs. Sit in a quiet station, keep an eye on a few dials, maybe drink too much coffee, and wait for morning. That's what they told me when I got assigned to ventilation monitoring in the old mine. Simple work, easy pay, but nothing is ever simple underground. The air has weight down there, pressing on your chest like an invisible hand. The walls don't just surround you, they breathe, slow and steady, like some massive creature slumbering in the dark. You tell yourself it's just the machines, just the air moving through the vents. But deep down, you know it's not. The miners had a saying, a little joke they'd toss around when someone was new. Don't listen too close. The mine remembers. I laughed when I first heard it. Of course I laughed. What else do you do when old men spit superstition in your face? But when you're alone, hours past midnight, sitting in a dimly lit booth 100 feet beneath the earth, that kind of talk doesn't feel like a joke anymore. I remember my first night clearly. The fluorescent bulbs above me buzzed, flickering like they were struggling against the dark instead of lighting it. My station was cramped, filled with humming monitors, green lines twitching across black screens, measuring air pressure and flow. Outside the booth's glass, the tunnel stretched into a yawning black throat. Every once in a while, I'd hear a pop in the distance, a groan of stone shifting against stone. And sometimes, just sometimes, I thought I heard something else. Voices, faint, murmuring, like a prayer whispered through walls of rock. I told myself it was imagination, but my hand stayed close to the logbook anyway, pen ready, because part of me wondered, if the mind really does remember, what exactly does it remember about us? The first time, I thought maybe I was dreaming. You sit alone for too long in the belly of a mine, and your brain starts to play tricks. But when the chanting came again, louder, closer, I knew it wasn't just in my head. The sound swelled through the ventilation shafts, building into a rhythm. Not random, not wind. It had a pattern, a pulse. I leaned toward the grate, straining to catch a word, but all I heard was my name, drawn out and broken, like someone trying to remember how to say it. I grabbed the radio, thumb hovering over the button, but something stopped me. The air felt charged, vibrating. If I called it in, what would I even say? The walls are chanting my name? I'd never lived that down. Then came the lift. The old freight elevator shuddered awake, chains clanking, gears screaming. I spun in my chair to the control board, every switch still dark. No call from the lower levels. No request for transport. The lift was moving on its own. I stood at the booth window, heart pounding, as it crawled up the shaft. Each floor it passed, I prayed it would stop. But it didn't. It kept rising, dragging something with it. When the gate finally slid open, I froze. Figures stood there, helmets splintered, lamps hanging dead, faces caved in like the rock had swallowed them whole. Their clothes were torn, coated in dust so they seemed carved out of the mine itself. None of them spoke, not with their mouths. But the chanting filled the air, steady and relentless, wrapping around me until my knees buckled. My name laced through it again and again as though they'd been waiting for me. I stumbled back, knocking over my chair, my pen skittering across the floor. My first thought was to run, but the monitors behind me spiked, airflow surging, pressure dipping like the tunnels themselves were gasping. The mind wasn't just remembering, it was calling. And somehow, I knew those figures weren't going to leave without me. I should have run the second that gate opened, but my legs locked, useless, as the figures stepped out. 5 of them, maybe 6, their shadows spilling across the floor. Their helmets caught the sickly glow from the emergency lights, cracked visors reflecting my own terrified face back at me. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The chanting poured from the walls, from the vents, from inside my own skull. My name, over and over, braided into some language I didn't recognize. The monitors behind me wailed, needles slamming into the red. Airflow shot off the charts, vents shrieking like the mine was sucking its last breath. Dust shook down from the ceiling, stinging my eyes. Then the first one touched me. Fingers like iron clamps, cold and damp, closing around my wrist. Another grabbed my shoulder. Their grip wasn't frantic, it was steady, determined, like this had always been the plan. My body jerked forward, heels skidding on the concrete. I tried to scream, but my throat sealed shut. My lungs refused air. My chest heaved like I was drowning, every breath stolen by the suffocating dark pressing in. The lift door yawned wider, waiting. Inside, the shadows moved. Not figures this time, but the tunnel itself, alive, coiling, pulling at me. No, I choked it out, barely a whisper, but it didn't matter. They weren't listening. My hand shot out, desperate, grabbing the edge of the desk. The logbook toppled, pages flapping open. My pen rolled, clattered to the floor. My last anchor to this world slipping away. They tugged again. My grip tore loose. My boots scraped sparks against the floor as they dragged me toward the shaft. The alarm shrieked, the air howled, the walls thundered with pressure ready to burst. And then I was weightless. The figures pulled me through the gate. The lift swallowed me whole. The last thing I saw before the doors slammed shut was the booth light flickering, struggling against the dark, and that damned logbook lying open, its final page blank, waiting for my last line. The drop felt endless. I don't know if I was falling through air, through stone, or through time itself. My stomach twisted, my ears roared with the sound of rushing wind, or was it the voices, layered, rising, demanding? Then it all stopped. Blackness pressed on me like a coffin lid, so heavy I thought my bones might snap. And then, silence. The alarms, the groans of the mind, even the chanting all gone. I opened my eyes, but it didn't matter. Darkness clung so thick I couldn't tell if they were open or shut. My hands searched blindly, scraping over rock slick with something that wasn't just water, cold, sticky, metallic. When sound returned, it wasn't mechanical, it was human, or something close, breathing, ragged, dozens of lungs inhaling, exhaling in unison. I wasn't alone. They were down there with me, shifting in the dark, circling. The helmets, the crushed faces, the green glow of their eyes, closer now, watching. I screamed or thought I did, but the noise never left my throat. My body wouldn't move, frozen in their grip. The only thing that moved was my hand, the same hand that had clutched the pen back in the booth. My fingers twitched, dragged across a rough surface. Paper, a page. I don't remember writing. I don't remember having the strength. But something guided my hand, jerking it across the paper, carving words with whatever fluid stained my skin. Above ground, the mind tore itself apart. Gauges ruptured, glass shattered, the pressure in the tunnel snapping like ribs giving way. Rescue teams scrambled to gear up as the earth itself groaned, sending tremors through the town. By the time they forced their way down into the shaft, the place looked abandoned. Equipment fried, cables melted, the booth door hanging loose, my chair overturned, the monitors dead. But the logbook remained. Every page tidy, every line accounted for. Normal readings, routine notes until the final scrawl. Not ink, not pen, just red. Fresh, thick, smeared across the paper. They're still digging. The words trailed off like whoever wrote them had been yanked mid-sentence, and the silence in that shaft, it wasn't empty. It was waiting. When they pulled me out of that lift, if pulled out is the right phrase, it felt more like the mind decided to spit me back up because I finally stopped kicking. The daylight hit like an accusation. I tasted iron and old coal for days. I learned, quickly and painfully, that some things you can escape and some things you carry with you like a stone in your pocket. The town stitched the shaft closed with wood and permits. Engineers came with clipboards and helmets and polite smiles. They chalked up the destruction to pressure anomalies, faulty wiring, an unfortunate cascade of mechanical failures. The company wrote a statement. The families wanted answers. The reporters wanted drama. I wanted a cigarette and a place where my name was not on a tongue being pulled out of dark mouths. Physically, I was whole enough. Emotionally, I was a ruin. Where before I'd scoffed at old miners' superstitions, I now knew why they kept theirs close. Superstition is a survival habit when the world beneath your feet remembers faces like debts. I tried explaining what happened. Most people nodded the way people do when they want to be polite but not involved. A few laughed. One man said, "You must have seen things." That was right. I had seen things. The rest of him, what those hands tried to take, did not come back. At night, the chanting followed me, not always audible. Sometimes it arrived as a pressure behind the eyes, a rhythm under my tongue, a name said in a language I had not known before. I woke up writing lines I did not intend to write. I found myself drawn to maps of the area, tracing tunnels I had never walked, feeling small tremors under my feet like a giant shifting in its sleep. I tried to stop listening. That lasted about as long as a match in a rainstorm. The mine had become a story I could not stop telling, and telling kept me tethered to the thing that wanted to keep me. I started leaving notes in the margins of the logbook I had left behind at the booth, warnings disguised as nonsense. Nobody read them the way they needed to be read. People like neat explanations. So they closed the entrance with fences and cameras and official language. The earth does not care for paperwork. It does not respect locks. It remembers. It keeps digging. If you like this story and want more that creeps under your skin and then refuses to leave, like the video and help this channel grow. Subscribe for daily stories told in the dark and share this with someone who likes being a little afraid. Thank you for listening and watching. There is another tale waiting for you on the screen now. I'll see you back here tomorrow if the tunnels let me. If you ever hear your name threaded through the wind coming from a hollow in the ground, will you step closer to listen, or will you walk away and pretend you never heard it? The janitor's keys. I've spent most of my life cleaning up after other people. Spilled milk in cafeterias, gum under desks, graffiti on bathroom stalls. You name it, I've scraped it. But nothing prepares you for the silence of a school after midnight. The halls stretch too long, like veins running through some sleeping giant, and you're the lone red cell pulsing through it. When you're the only heartbeat inside, even your own footsteps sound like an intruder's. That night was supposed to be ordinary. Just me, my mop, and the old brass ring of keys I carried like a badge of honor. They jingled against my leg with every step, a sound I usually found comforting. But not that night. That night, the sound felt alive, like the keys weren't following me, but tugging me somewhere I hadn't planned to go. You ever get the sense that a building can hold its breath? That's what I walked into. The air had weight to it, thick and waiting, as if every door along the hall leaned forward to listen. The lockers along the wall seemed to watch me, their metal mouths shut tight, though I swore I heard one breathe. I told myself it was nothing. Old pipes, drafty windows, my mind playing tricks. But I couldn't shake it. The janitor's closet mirror caught my reflection as I passed, and for just a flicker, just one heartbeat, I swear I saw someone else walking behind me. I gripped my keys a little tighter. That's the thing about holding the only set. You believe you control the building. But sometimes when the night stretches too long and the silence bends around corners, it feels like the building has its own set, and it's unlocking you. I froze at the top of the stairs, every instinct screaming to turn back. The keys jingled like wind chimes in a storm, tugging at my belt loop so hard I thought they might tear free. The basement door was chained, padlocked, welded shut with a crust of rust so old it looked like dried blood. And yet my keys, it's crazy even saying this, they twisted on the ring, separating themselves, the teeth glinting under the flicker of the stairwell light. One key slid forward, pointing at the door. I laughed, a nervous, choking sound. No, not happening. But the moment I stepped back, the entire row of lockers upstairs erupted like gunfire. Doors slamming, metal ringing, echoes racing down the hall like a stampede. My mop clattered out of my hand. And then, children's laughter. Soft at first, then louder, layered, overlapping, filling the air with a sound no empty school should ever carry. I felt it in my chest, the wrongness. This wasn't a prank. No kids hid in the shadows. That laughter came from somewhere older, buried deeper, like it had been waiting decades for ears to hear it again. The keys dragged down. I stumbled after them, every step heavy, like I wasn't walking, but being reeled in. My palms slick with sweat, I reached the basement door. Click, the key slid into the padlock as if it had always belonged there. I wanted to stop, I swear I did. But the cold metal burned in my fingers, twisting, snapping the lock open with a sharp crack that echoed like a gunshot through the stairwell. The chains fell away. The door groaned, heavy and wet, as though the darkness behind it had been holding its breath for 50 years. The smell hit me first, damp, iron, and something sweet that didn't belong. And through the crack in the door, I swear I saw small shapes darting, shadows too quick to follow, whispering and giggling in voices that sounded like they belonged to children who'd never grown up. I knew I should run, but the thing about keys is this. Once you open the first lock, the rest are waiting. And mine weren't finished with me yet. The sound was deafening, A slam that rattled the pipes and shook dust from the ceiling. My keys shrieked on the ring, metal grinding against metal, and then flew from my belt, clattering somewhere in the dark. The laughter rose, overlapping, 100 voices that didn't belong to any living throat. They circled me, darting shapes I couldn't pin down. Too fast, too many, a tug at my shirt, cold fingers curling around my ankle. Who's there? My own voice broke, thin, like it didn't belong to me anymore. Something answered, not in words, but in a chorus of whispers that slithered through my ears, pressing straight into my skull. Stay. Stay with us. A sharp pain exploded across my calf. I looked down, little hands, dozens of them clawing from the shadows. Nails too long, skin too pale. I kicked, stumbled, tried to bolt for the door, but the damn thing had vanished. Only blackness and voices and laughter that bent into screams. My hands fumbled, desperate for my keys, my lifeline, but the jingling had stopped. Then, behind me, a glint of brass. The keys hovered midair, dangling like bait. Slowly, deliberately, they began to turn in the void, fitting themselves into invisible locks. Each twist of metal sent a shudder through the floor, as if the building itself were unlocking bone by bone. And I realized the truth. Too late to matter. The keys were never mine. I was theirs. The final lock clicked. The walls groaned. Shapes rushed in, no longer child-sized, but stretched, twisted, towering. Laughter warping into screams, screams bending back into laughter. Hands grabbed my arms, my neck, pulling me down into the floor that wasn't solid anymore. I fought, clawed, thrashed, but the more I struggled, the tighter they gripped. The dark swallowed me in waves, smothering air, crushing ribs. The last thing I saw before the black closed over me was my ring of keys, spinning slowly in the dark, glowing faintly like eyes. And then they yanked me under. No way out, no way back. Just the cold truth. The door had never been locked to keep them in. It had been locked to keep me, fools like me, out. When the dark finally spat me out, I wasn't sure if I had blacked out or if time itself had folded in on me. I was lying on the cold basement floor, gasping, my lungs burning like I'd been drowning. The laughter was gone, the whispers silenced. Only the heavy drip of water somewhere in the shadows marked the silence. I forced myself upright, every bone aching, my vision swimming. My keys were gone. The weight that had always been there against my hip was missing, and the emptiness of it felt worse than the bruises on my skin. The door was open. Chains snapped, lock discarded like it had never belonged. I stumbled into the hall, my shoes squealing against the tile. The school looked the same, linoleum floors, fluorescent hum, dusty trophy cases. But it wasn't the same. The air felt wrong, charged. Like every hallway was holding its breath again, waiting for me to slip. I tried the front entrance, locked. Windows too. Every door I touched rattled, as if mocking me. And in the reflection of the glass, I swore I saw children lined up neatly behind me. Rows of shadowed faces, watching, silent. By the time dawn pushed through the skylights, I wasn't sure if I had survived the night or been changed by it. Teachers filtered in, voices echoing cheerfully, oblivious to what had happened below their feet. Not one of them noticed me standing there, trembling, clothes torn, eyes wide. When the principal passed, he didn't even glance my way, as though I wasn't there, as though I'd slipped in some in-between place, half claimed. I staggered down the hall, desperate to hear my own steps, my own heartbeat. And that's when I saw it. Rusted shut, a fresh number stenciled in red, one I had never seen before. Faint scratching scraped from inside, steady like fingernails dragging at the steel. My stomach turned to ice. I didn't need to open it. I already knew what was waiting, because I could hear the faint jingle of keys inside, my keys, and the whisper that followed chilled me worse than any scream. Stay. By sunrise, the school was alive again. Bells rang, sneakers squeaked, chatter bounced off the walls. It was almost enough to convince me the night had been a fever dream. Almost. I wandered the halls, invisible. Students brushed past without seeing me. Teachers nodded at one another, never at me. It was like I had been peeled out of their world and placed beside it, condemned to watch but never touch. And then I saw it, near the entrance, the locker. No one questioned why it had appeared overnight. They just walked around it, eyes averted, like they knew without knowing. Rust covered its seams, flaking to the floor. The handle was fused in place, blistered metal that looked more like scar tissue than steel. I stepped closer. The scratching came first, slow, rhythmic, nails dragging across the inside. Then the whisper, my whisper. My voice muffled, begging to be let out. I stumbled back, breath shattering leg, because I was standing there hearing myself from both sides of the door. Alive, but not. Free, but trapped. Changed. The truth hit like a punch to the ribs. I never really left the basement. The locker was me, or maybe I was the locker. And if you ever see it, rusted, silent, waiting, you'll have to decide. Do you keep walking, or do you press your ear against the cold steel and listen to what's inside? Because if you hear the jingle of keys, it's already too late. If this story chilled you, don't forget to like this video. It helps the channel grow and pushes it out to more horror lovers like you. Subscribe for daily stories that'll keep you up at night, and share this one with someone who thinks schools are safe after dark. Thank you for listening and watching. Another story waits for you right here on your screen. Click it, and I'll meet you back tomorrow. Sleep well, if you can. The hotel bellhop. They say hotels never really sleep. Even when the halls are empty and the carpets smell faintly of bleach, the walls remember. My first night on the night shift felt like stepping into that memory. I was 19, broke, chasing tips that could pay for textbooks or maybe just keep the lights on at home. The lobby clock ticked too loud, like it was counting down. The place was nearly empty, just a few scattered guests and me, a bellhop in a suit that never quite fit. But hotels, they're like graveyards with better lighting. You learn fast that some floors stay quiet for a reason. I stood at the front desk, pretending to polish brass while the manager, a guy named Ellis with a face like an old shoe, taught me the delicate art of smiling without promising anything. Whatever happens, he said, keep it calm. People come here to rest. He didn't look rested. Outside, rain stitched the windows into gray fabric. Inside, the elevator doors kept sighing open to nobody, like a tired old man remembering to breathe. I told myself it was the sensor. I told myself a lot of things. The carpet on the 6th floor had a pattern that made your eyes go soft if you stared too long. Gold vines curling into themselves, swallowing every straight line. The night engineer said the design was chosen to discourage loitering. It discouraged counting too. You could walk a hallway and feel like it had walked a little more of you. I made a loop with the luggage cart, practicing the quiet wheels, the soft steps. The bell nearest the desk, one of those little silver domes, had a tiny dent in it like a tooth mark. Ellis saw me looking. Don't worry about that, he said. Some guests bite. Somewhere above us, a phone rang once and then thought better of it. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, like a throat clearing in an empty theater. Ellis didn't move. You'll get calls that don't make sense, he said. Answer them anyway. The clock ticked, the elevator sighed, and in the mirror doors I thought for a second, I saw my suit fit. Then the reflection smiled a half second late. That's when the call came. Room service request for 6116. Simple enough, except when I checked the registry, there was no room 616. Still, the manager shrugged. If the phone rings, you answer it. His voice was flat, like he'd said it 100 times before. Maybe he had. So I lugged a suitcase into the elevator, watching the floor numbers glow like a countdown. Each ding felt like a warning. My reflection in the mirrored wall looked pale, sweat smearing the cheap wool of my jacket. The 6th floor greeted me with silence so deep it pressed on my chest. The hallway stretched longer than it should have. The carpet's twisting pattern seemed to bend under my feet, pulling me further in. Then I saw it. A brass number nailed to a door I swear hadn't been there before, 616. I stopped, my pulse hammered in my ears. The other doors around it looked normal, paint peeling, brass dull. But this one gleamed, like it had been polished for my arrival. My hand shook when I knocked. The door creaked open on its own, not into a room, but into a black void. It wasn't dark like midnight. It was dark like absence, like someone had scooped the world out of the frame. Then came the whispers, rising, falling, wrapping around my head, my name. At first, I thought it was the air ducts, but then my own voice echoed back, worn thin like it had been dragged across years. Come in, it said. Your tip's waiting. I wanted to run. My legs wouldn't listen. The suitcase handle bit into my palm as if rooting me there. Behind me, the hallway lights flickered, buzzing like angry bees. Ahead, the void seemed to breathe, swelling closer, tasting the air between us. The strangest part, a smell drifted out. Not mildew, not rot, just the faint trace of hotel soap, the kind they leave wrapped in paper by the sink. Comforting. Familiar. Wrong. And then, just before the door yawned wider, I heard laughter, my laughter, from inside. The suitcase grew heavy in my hand, heavier than it had any right to be. My heart slammed against my ribs like the elevator cables straining under too much weight. I should have dropped everything and bolted, but I didn't. Something pulled me forward. Not just the whispers, not just curiosity, like gravity itself had shifted. The darkness inside wasn't empty anymore. It rippled. Shapes leaned close, too quick to see, too patient to hide. Voices tangled over one another, murmurs swelling into a chorus. Guests calling my name, promising tips I'd never spend. Their words weren't offers, they were bargains. I raised a hand, trembling, just to touch the doorframe, to prove it was real. That's when it happened. A hand, ice-cold, claw-thin, shot out of the void and clamped around my wrist. I jerked back, too late. The grip tightened, digging into my bones. The suitcase slipped from my other hand, spinning once before vanishing into the black like it had been swallowed whole. My breath came sharp, shallow. "Come in," my voice echoed. Older now, cracked like glass. "We've been waiting." I thrashed. Nails clawed the carpet, tearing threads loose as I was dragged across the threshold. The hallway lights flared and popped, glass raining down. My scream tore loose, but the sound was devoured before it left my throat. Inside, there was no floor, no ceiling, just an abyss humming with whispers. Faces surfaced and sank again. A man in a bellhop's cap from another era. A woman with her eyes sewn shut. Children giggling through bloody teeth. They pulled at me, tugged at my jacket, my tie, my skin. For one desperate moment, I thought of Ellis, the manager, sitting smug behind the desk, telling me to keep it calm. Did he know? Had he sent me here on purpose? The cold hand on my wrist yanked harder. My feet left the ground. I flailed, reaching for the brass numbers nailed to the door, but they bent under my grip, soft as wax. The void swallowed me whole, and then the door slammed shut. Silence. That was the first thing. Not the hush of an empty hall, but the crushing kind, like I'd been dropped at the bottom of a lake. My ears rang, my throat burned raw from a scream I wasn't sure I'd actually made. Then, faint and distant, the lobby clock struck 6. Each chime echoed through the dark, as though reminding me the world outside still existed. And just like that, the hotel woke up. I heard it, though I couldn't see it. The whir of coffee pots in the dining room, luggage carts squeaking against the lobby tiles, guests murmuring about checkout times and taxi fares. Normal life, threading itself back together while I floated somewhere else entirely. On the 6th floor, Ellis did his morning rounds, keys jangling at his side. He walked past 602, 610, 614, then stopped, frowning. There was no 616. Never had been. He scratched his head, muttered something under his breath, and kept going. His shoes squeaked on the patterned carpet, the vines curling beneath him like they'd grown overnight. But one thing waited for him, the suitcase. My suitcase. Sitting upright in the hallway, the handle extended like a hand raised for help. Ellis crouched down, confusion clouding his face. No tag, no initials, just a bellhop's uniform folded neatly inside. A name tag gleaming on top, catching the strip of morning light. My name. He picked it up, weighed it in his palm, too heavy for just clothes. The kind of heavy that makes you think twice before opening it. He didn't. Instead, he set it back down, careful, as though it might bite. Downstairs, guests laughed, doors slammed, a cab honked. Life went on, business as usual. But on the 6th floor, the air stayed wrong. Thick, stale, buzzing faintly like a blown light bulb. Ellis lingered, staring at the spot where a brass 6116 should have been, his lips pressed thin. He reached for the wall, tracing the wallpaper vines. For a moment, his fingers stilled. He thought he felt a seam, a door frame where there was no door. He pulled his hand back. The clock in the lobby chimed again, 6:30. And in the silence that followed, he swore he heard it. Faint, muffled, almost a whisper. Laughter. My laughter. When they finally unzipped it, the truth spilled out. My uniform, pressed and folded with care, like someone had prepared it for burial. My name tag, polished to a mirror shine, and tucked beneath the collar, an envelope. The hotel's stationery, inside, an itemized bill, paid in full. Addressed to my parents, with a single line scrawled in ink at the bottom. We thank you for your son's service. Ellis didn't show anyone. He couldn't. He just zipped the case shut again and left it standing in the hallway like it belonged there. Guests passed it by, never curious enough to ask. They rarely are. Hotels are built on ignoring what doesn't fit the story. But me, I was still there, or pieces of me were. Every time the elevator sighed open on the 6th floor with no one inside. Every time the phone rang once, then stopped, like a throat clearing from nowhere. Every time a guest swore they heard a knock at their door at 3 a.m. and found nothing waiting but silence. That's me, walking the halls, cart rattling softly, delivering what's left of myself to a room that doesn't exist. Do you know what the cruelest part is? I still hear the tips clinking in my pocket. Heavy, promised, unspent. So tell me, if you're ever working the night shift in a hotel and the phone rings with a request for a room that isn't on the map, what will you do? Will you keep walking, head down, pretending you never heard it? Or will you open the door? Because once you do, you'll find out exactly how much your service is worth. Thank you for listening to this story. If it sent a chill through you, do me a favor, hit the like button to help this channel grow. Subscribe for daily stories that keep the lights burning low, and share this with someone who needs a reminder not to answer strange calls at night. There's another video waiting for you right here on your screen, and I'll see you back tomorrow. If, of course, the door lets you out. The morgue attendant. I'll never forget my first night in the morgue. You'd think the dead are quiet, right? That's what I thought too. But silence can scream when you're the only one alive in a room full of bodies. It presses in, like the weight of 100 unspoken words, waiting for someone foolish enough to listen. The place smelled like bleach and old metal, that sour tang that clings to your tongue and refuses to leave. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, like jittering like they were powered by some half-dead insect, casting shadows that stretched too long, too thin, like they had lives of their own. I was 22, broke, and desperate for a paycheck. The morgue was never on my list of dream jobs. It was on the list of last resorts. But money talks louder than fear, and fear only gets a whisper in a city like this. My supervisor, a man with eyes as gray as wet cement, handed me a clipboard and said, "Don't get lost." I thought he was joking. He wasn't. The job was simple. Tag the corpses, log the names, note the time of arrival. Easy in theory. They warned me about theft, rings, watches, gold teeth. Apparently the living were greedier than the dead. I didn't care about any of that. I just wanted to get through the shift without puking on my shoes. But then, halfway down the row of stainless steel drawers, I saw it. A toe tag dangling lazily off a pale foot. The letters scratched in with pen were smudged, but the name was clear enough. It was my name. My first thought? Some sick joke. A mistake. But the handwriting looked too deliberate, too final. And when I leaned closer, the body on the sheet shifted, ever so slightly, like it was waiting. At first, I laughed it off, a sick prank for rookies. Some bitter tech with a dark sense of humor, maybe. But the laugh stuck in my throat. The cold bit deeper than it should have, seeping into my bones like the morgue itself wanted me frozen. I bent to pick up the clipboard I dropped, and that's when I heard it again. Not the hum of the lights, not the gurgle of old pipes, but a voice. Thin, raspy, curling along the tiled walls like cigarette smoke. Leave, leave. I spun around. Empty. Just steel drawers, polished and waiting. Just bags zipped and sealed. Just me. My pulse hammered in my ears. I pressed my back against the wall and told myself it was nerves, exhaustion, maybe the echo of my own breathing. But then, movement. Out of the corner of my eye, a sheet twitched. Just a toe, one toe, then another, like they were flexing in unison. I froze. The clipboard clattered again and my hands shook too hard to hold it, and then the sheets began to ripple, subtle but unmistakable, as if the bodies beneath were restless sleepers, shifting, stretching, about to wake. Panic shot through me. I bolted to the nearest door, slammed my shoulder against it, locked. I sprinted to the next, locked. Another, locked. Every single one heavy steel, unyielding. It was as if the morgue had swallowed me whole and snapped its teeth shut. The whispers grew louder, circling me, overlapping until they sounded like a crowd just out of sight. A crowd that wasn't alive. Leave, leave. But how the hell was I supposed to leave when every exit was sealed? I pressed my palms against the glass of a small observation window, breath fogging the pain, desperate for movement on the other side. But the hall was empty. When I turned back, the toe tag with my name dangled just a little closer to the floor, swinging gently. No breeze, no draft, just a sway, steady as a pendulum, ticking off the seconds I had left. And that's when I realized the whispers weren't urging me to leave. They were warning me. The freezer door creaked open on its own, slow and deliberate, the sound shrieking through the morgue like metal claws on stone. My heart stopped. A thin wash of blue light spilled out from inside, cold as moonlight. I stepped closer, against every ounce of reason, against every scream inside my skull, and saw it. A body bag. Black, glossy, half unzipped. And inside, a face. My face. Pale, lips purple as bruises. Eyes shut, but the lids quivered like they were dreaming. Like I was dreaming. I staggered back, knees buckling, clipboard skittering across the tiles. My chest heaved, but no air came. I clawed at my throat like it had been sealed shut. And then the eyes opened, dead white, clouded, and yet staring at me with an intimacy no stranger should ever hold. A mirror dragged through hell. I screamed, but the sound snapped like a wire. The morgue light sputtered, flickered, then cut, plunging me into a darkness so thick it felt alive. Total silence, until I heard it. The zipper, a slow rasp, teeth clinking together, pulling closed. Shh, shh, shh. But it wasn't sealing that bag. It was sealing all of them. All around me, from every table, every drawer, came the same dreadful chorus of zippers fastening shut, bodies locking themselves in as if preparing for a journey. And in the dark, something moved. Heavy, wet, dragging across the floor closer and closer. The whispers were gone now. What replaced them was worse. Breathing, thick, labored, right behind me. My hand slammed against the wall, searching for a switch, a handle, anything. I had to choose. Turn and face it, or keep clawing for an escape I knew wasn't there. I turned, and the blue light bloomed again, bathing the room in its sickly glow. Every bag was upright now, standing. My own doppelganger stepped forward from the freezer, the zipper finally shut to the chin. It smiled, not with my mouth, with something wearing it. And it whispered in my voice, "Your shift is over." I don't remember hitting the floor. 1 second I was staring into the eyes of something that wore my face. The next it was gone, like the lights had swallowed it, like my mind had decided to spare me the details. Maybe I blacked out. Maybe something dragged me under. When I came to, the buzzing lights were steady again. The morgue quiet, too quiet. No whispers, no zippers, just the hum of electricity and the cold weight of the air pressing down on me. I stumbled to my feet, chest aching, throat raw, and made for the exit. This time, the door swung open without resistance, as if it had never been locked at all. The hallway beyond stretched empty, sterile, indifferent. By the time the sun rose, I was gone, or at least I thought I was. The supervisor swore later that I had never clocked in for my shift, said he'd waited, assumed I bailed like plenty of rookies before me. He even laughed, called me smart for not showing up. But his laugh didn't reach his eyes, because when he walked me down into the morgue trying to prove it, something was waiting for us. One fresh body bag lay on the slab, sealed, smooth, cold to the touch. The tag was clear as day. My name. I opened my mouth to protest, to scream, to say I'm right here. But my supervisor just frowned, cocked his head and walked away. Didn't ask questions, didn't even look back. Like he'd seen this before. The morgue swallowed the sound of his retreating footsteps, leaving me alone again. Alone with the rows of silent dead and the bag on the slab that should not have been there. I reached out, hand trembling, inches from the zipper pull. If I opened it, maybe I'd see nothing. Maybe it would be empty, some mistake, some cruel joke. But deep down, I knew better, because as my fingers hovered over the bag, I heard it again, faint, muffled from inside, breathing, my own. Sealed, labeled, cold to the touch. That bag never left my mind. Not the weight of it, not the way the zipper seemed to tremble under my hand, as though it was holding something in that desperately wanted out. My name, written in black ink, neat and final, like a signature on a death certificate. I left the morgue that morning, but something in me never really left. Every reflection since has felt off. The mirror doesn't always blink when I do. My voice on recording sounds like a stranger mimicking me. And some nights, when I close my eyes, I hear the zipper again. Slow, steady, sealing shut. You expect these kinds of stories to end with escape, with survival. But what if the real trap isn't the morgue, or the bag, or even death? What if the trap is living while knowing death already has your name on file, waiting for the night it decides to call you back? So tell me, if you ever see your name on a toe tag, would you stay and pretend it means nothing? Or would you run, knowing there's nowhere left to run to? Because I've learned something. The dead aren't jealous of the living. They're patient. They're organized. And above all, they don't make mistakes with names. Mine was written once. That's enough. So when the lights buzz a little too loud in the middle of the night, when shadows crawl just a little too far across your wall, ask yourself, is it already your shift? And if you listen closely, you might hear it too. That faint, muffled breathing from the wrong side of the zipper. Thank you for listening and for watching this story. If it sent chills through you, do me a favor. Like this video to help the channel grow and make it more visible to others who love horror. Subscribe for daily content and share it with someone who needs a good scare tonight. There's another story waiting for you right here on your screen. Go watch it next, and I'll see you back tomorrow. The Locked Attic. Ever notice how kids can't resist the one place they're told never to go? That was Tommy. 8 years old, curious as a stray cat. He lived in a quiet old house, the kind with creaking stairs and wallpaper that peeled like dead skin, the sort of house that kept its secrets tucked away in the wood grain. His parents had one rule: don't ever go in the attic. Of course, that only made him wonder. What was up there? A chest of pirate gold? Old toys from when his dad was a boy? Or maybe something darker? Tommy wasn't the type to ignore a locked door. He was the type who dreamed about it, stared at the ceiling when the lights went out, and wondered what lay just above his head. At night, he swore he heard it. Not the light, scampering noise of rats, not the hollow moan of wind sliding through broken shingles. No, this was heavier. A dragging sound like someone shifting boxes, or someone pacing, waiting. He'd pull the covers tighter, but curiosity always pulled tighter still. The attic door was at the very top of the staircase, tucked beneath the slant of the roof. A warped wooden hatch with a black iron latch, rusted at the edges. His mother polished everything in that house except that latch. She never even touched it. If Tommy so much as looked at it too long, his father's voice would boom sharp as thunder. Not for you. Don't ask again. So, naturally, he asked again. Why not? His mother only said, because some doors aren't meant to be opened. But kids don't believe in meant to. They believe in what if. And Tommy's what if grew louder every night, especially when the noises above shifted closer, pressing down on the ceiling. One evening, while the house sat in its usual silence, he noticed something new. Dust falling from the seam of the attic hatch, drifting lazily into the air like gray snow. He held out his hand and caught it. Warm, not cold, not like dust should be. Warm, like someone had just stirred it with their breath. That was the first time Tommy realized the attic wasn't just a place. It was watching him back. One afternoon, when his parents were out, Tommy found the key. It was hanging on a nail inside the laundry room, half buried under a string of aprons. Rusted, cold, the kind of key that shouldn't still fit anything, but his stomach told him exactly what door it belonged to. It felt wrong in his hand, too heavy, too sharp, as if it had been waiting for him. The attic door moaned when he turned the latch. The sound crawled down the hallway like an animal in pain. When he pushed it open, a wave of dust poured out, thick and suffocating, like the attic itself had been holding its breath. The air was warm, too warm. He climbed the narrow steps, each board sighing under his sneakers, and found himself in a maze of boxes. Towering stacks of old clothes, rusted lamps, broken toys. Everything was draped in cobwebs so thick they hung like curtains, swaying when he brushed past. And then he saw it, a mirror, tall, framed in black wood, carved with strange, curling patterns, draped in a yellowing sheet. It stood in the center of the room, commanding attention, like everything else had been shoved aside to make space for it. Tommy's chest tightened. He knew, with the kind of certainty only children have, that he shouldn't touch it, that the sheet was there for a reason. But rules, warnings, fear, they all melt away in the heat of curiosity. He grabbed the cloth and yanked it down, and froze. The boy staring back at him was not him. Same age, same size, but his face looked shredded, like broken glass pieced together badly. Skin pale, eyes wet and trembling. His lips moved, forming a single word, Help! Tommy stumbled back, tripping over a box. The mirror rattled, but didn't fall. His breath came fast, ragged, like he'd just been running. And when he dared to look again, the mirror was normal, his own scared little face staring back. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Every time he shut his eyes, he saw the boy's torn face. He dragged himself to the bathroom, splashed water on his skin, and glanced at the mirror above the sink. For just a blink, he swore the face wasn't his. Someone else blinked back. The next day, he tried to tell himself he'd imagined it, that his mind had played tricks. But by evening, he was back at the attic door. The mirror waited. The boy was there again, not pleading this time. His expression hardened. His fists struck the glass, slow at first, then harder, louder, a violent rhythm that made the frame shiver on its legs. Tommy's heart pounded in time with the blows. He wanted to run, to slam the attic door shut forever, but he didn't. Something held him there. Some invisible rope tied to his ribs, pulling him closer every night. And each night, the boy's fist hit harder, closer, until the mirror itself seemed ready to break. And then, one night, it happened. The pounding from the mirror didn't stop. It grew sharper, meaner, until it wasn't fists anymore, but something more like claws raking the glass. Tommy sat frozen on the floor, every instinct screaming at him to run, but his legs were locked. His chest felt crushed, like the attic air had thickened into tar. Then the sound changed. Not a knock, not a scratch, a crack. The mirror split down the center, jagged white lines racing outward like lightning across a storm cloud. 1,000 fractured versions of Tommy's face blinked back at him, twisted and broken. And then the screaming started. Not out loud, not through ears, but inside his skull, raw and endless. He clamped his hands over his head, but it didn't matter. The voice was there, shrieking, tearing at his thoughts. Let me out! Let me out! The glass gave way with a final shrill snap. A pale arm shot forward, tearing through the splinters. Fingers stretched too long, nails cracked and black, joints bending wrong. It groped the air like it already owned the room. Tommy screamed and scrambled back, kicking over a box of old photographs that scattered like dead leaves across the floor. Then came the head. That boy's face. Only now it wasn't a boy anymore. Flesh split, pulled thin like wet paper. Eyes dark hollows glowing faintly from within. And that smile, that jagged, gaping smile, too wide for a human mouth. The thing pulled itself free. First one shoulder, then another. Its movements didn't flow like a person climbing out of water. They snapped, jerked, bone cracking, as if every motion hurt and it liked the pain. The attic bent around them both. The air grew thick, buzzing with the vibration of the thing's hunger. Shadows on the walls twisted in time with its movements, reaching toward Tommy like skeletal fingers. He bolted. He stumbled over boxes, crashed into cobwebs, and barreled down the attic steps. The sound of splintering wood followed him. No, not wood. The mirror frame breaking apart, spilling whatever had been locked inside for God knows how long. He slammed the attic door and fumbled the latch closed, his hands shaking so violently the key nearly dropped. His chest heaved, his ears rang, and for a heartbeat he thought maybe it was still trapped up there. But then he heard it. That smile had sound. Not laughter, not breath, but the scrape of teeth dragging across wood. And when Tommy dared to glance up, a single pale hand pressed against the underside of the attic door. Fingers flexed, testing. The attic wasn't big enough for both of them anymore. The last thing he saw before running, before hurling himself into the safety of his room and slamming his door shut, was its smile burned into his memory. Jagged, wrong, free. His parents found him the next morning, curled like a wounded animal beneath his bed. His pajamas clung to him with cold sweat, his lips pale, his eyes wide and hollow. When they tried to pull him out, he fought them, kicking, screaming, until exhaustion left him limp. The house was quiet, too quiet. The attic door was closed again, the rusted latch sealed tight as if it had never been touched. But when his father climbed the stairs, his face went stiff and gray. The hatch was different. New nails hammered into the wood, as if the house itself had tried to bury the doorway overnight. Inside, the mirror was gone. Not shattered into pieces, not standing whole, just gone. The boxes sat untouched, the cobwebs thick again, but the dust smelled scorched, like burned hair and old blood. His father backed away without a word. They never spoke of it, not once. No questions, no explanations. That same day, his mother fetched a hammer and a box of nails. She pressed her lips thin, her hands shaking only once before she set the first nail in place. The attic door was boarded shut by dusk, the wood groaning as though protesting every strike. Tommy watched from the stairs. He wanted to ask, "Did you see it? Did you hear it?" But the words died in his throat. His parents' silence was louder than screams. It was as if they already knew, as if they had always known, and their only answer was to erase the attic from their lives. Erase it. But Tommy couldn't. That night, lying in his bed, he stared at the ceiling. He told himself he was safe. The door was nailed shut, nothing could get through. But sleep never came, because he heard it. The scratching, slow, deliberate, fingernails dragging against wood just above his head. He pressed the pillow over his ears, but the sound cut through, steady as a heartbeat. Scratch, pause, scratch. Days blurred into weeks, but the noise never stopped. Some nights it grew louder, like claws raking deeper grooves into the beams. Other nights it was faint, almost teasing, as if reminding him it hadn't gone anywhere. His parents pretended not to notice. They cooked, they cleaned, they laughed at the television. But every so often, when they thought he wasn't watching, he caught them flinching, eyes darting upward at the sound, faces paling, hands tightening around forks or coffee cups. They heard it too. They just refused to admit it. Tommy stopped playing outside. He stopped answering questions at school. His friends teased him about the shadows under his eyes, the way he jumped at sudden noises. But none of that mattered, because every night the scratching waited. The attic might have been sealed. The mirror might have vanished, but what had come through had never left. Years passed. Tommy grew taller, older, harder around the edges. Childhood melted into adolescence, then adulthood. He went to school, got jobs, made friends. From the outside, he looked like anyone else. Normal, ordinary. But the truth was, Tommy was never normal again. Some scars aren't on the skin. They live in the silence between heartbeats, in the pause before you look over your shoulder. And for Tommy, they lived in glass. He learned to avoid mirrors when he could. Not out of vanity, out of fear. Because every so often, just when he wasn't paying attention, when he caught his reflection from the corner of his eye, he noticed it lagged, half a beat behind, a blink late, a smile too sharp. And sometimes it wasn't him at all. Once in a hotel bathroom, he swore he saw that boy again. The shredded face, the blackened nails, watching from the silvered surface while Tommy stood frozen with soap dripping from his hands. He didn't stay the night. He checked out and never went back. The attic, it stayed sealed. Boards nailed over boards, painted until the hatch blended into the ceiling like it had never been there. His parents moved out eventually, sold the place, swore they'd never set foot near it again. But Tommy knew better, because the scratching followed him. Every apartment, every house, every city. No matter where he ran, the noise came back. Soft at first, like a mouse in the walls, then sharper, louder. A rhythm that kept him awake at night. Scratch, pause, scratch. It never stopped. And the older he got, the more it changed. It wasn't always above his head anymore. Sometimes it came from the bathroom mirror. Sometimes from the dark TV screen in the middle of the night. Sometimes from a window when he passed, his reflection grinning just a little too wide. Until, one evening, the truth made itself clear. He was brushing his teeth, half asleep, leaning close to the bathroom mirror, toothpaste foaming at his lips. His reflection leaned in too. But this time, when he spat into the sink, the boy in the mirror didn't move. Instead, it winked. A slow, deliberate wink. The kind that says, "I've been here all along." And in that moment, Tommy understood. He hadn't locked the attic. Not really. The attic had locked him. And the scratching was never trying to get out. It was waiting for him to finally let it in. If that story sent a chill down your spine, do me a favor. Like this video so it reaches more people who love a good scare. Subscribe for daily stories that keep you up at night, and share this one with a friend who swears they're not afraid of the dark. Thanks for watching. Another story is waiting for you right here on your screen. I'll see you back tomorrow. The Ragged Doll. Let me tell you something you won't believe. Every small town has a secret, but sometimes it's not the town you need to fear. It's what sits quietly in the corner of your own room. There was a boy named Daniel, 9 years old, thin as a reed, with hair that always looked like he just rolled out of bed. His world had already been broken once, His grandmother, the only person who ever made him feel seen, had passed away. The house felt emptier than a church after midnight. His parents went through the motions of grief. Casseroles from neighbors, hushed voices in the kitchen, the quiet clink of glasses at night when they thought he was asleep. But Daniel's grief was a thing that refused to stay polite. It gnawed at him, restless and raw. All he had left of her was a doll. Not just any doll, a porcelain-faced thing, too heavy for a child to carry around, with raggedy yarn hair that stuck out in tufts and glass eyes that seemed to catch the light in ways no eyes should. It was the kind of toy no kid in their right mind would love. But Daniel did, because it smelled faintly of her lavender perfume. It reminded him of her lap, her soft humming, her hands smoothing his hair when nightmares made him cry. He tucked the doll into bed with him. He whispered secrets to it, promises he was too young to understand. "I'll never forget you. I'll never let you go." And though he told himself he was talking to the doll, deep down he knew he was talking to her. But here's the thing people never tell you about grief. It doesn't just keep memories alive. Sometimes it invites something else in, something hungry. At first, it was small things. Daniel swore the doll's head tilted a little more toward him than he remembered, or that when he left it on the chair, he'd come back to find it on the dresser. His parents told him he was sleepwalking. They laughed it off, the way adults laugh when they don't want to think too hard about what a child is saying. But Daniel noticed. He noticed how cold the room felt at night, how the doll's eyes, those glass marbles, didn't just shine but seemed to follow. And when the wind rattled the windows, he thought he heard something beneath the sound, low and hushed, like his grandmother's voice murmuring his name. And in that moment, the boy began to wonder if holding on to her had been a mistake. Because some things hold on tighter than you think. At first, it was just whispers in the dark, a sigh that didn't belong in an empty room. Daniel swore he saw the doll's head turn when no one was watching. His parents? They laughed it off. But the whispers grew louder. Sometimes he'd wake up, and the doll wasn't where he left it. Once it sat at the edge of his bed, staring, its porcelain hand raised as if it had been reaching for him. He told himself he was imagining things. Kids do that, right? Right until the night he woke screaming. 3 fresh claw marks etched across his chest. His parents stopped laughing then. They rushed him to the bathroom, his father holding him tight while his mother dabbed at the blood with shaking hands. "Must have been the cat," his father muttered, though they didn't own one. "He scratched himself in his sleep," his mother whispered, though the marks were too deep, too deliberate. That night, they moved the doll out of Daniel's room. His mother tucked it into a box in the attic, as if walls and rafters could hold whatever clung to it. Daniel tried to sleep without it, but the house changed. The air grew heavy, like wet cloth pressed to his face, and the whispers didn't stop. If anything, they multiplied. "Danny," a voice breathed from the corner. He hid under the blanket, praying it would muffle the sound. His grandmother's perfume hung thick in the air, sharp and cloying, as though someone had spilled the bottle right beside him. The next morning, he found footprints on the floor. Not his. Small, delicate, smudges of soot leading from the attic door to his bed. When he told his parents, they exchanged worried looks. His father muttered about psychiatrists. His mother wept silently at the sink. Neither wanted to check the attic. Neither wanted to touch the box again. Daniel was left alone with it. Every night, the whispers grew bolder, the voice clearer. It wasn't just his name anymore, it was sentences, promises, please, don't leave me, stay forever. Then came the scratching, first against the walls, then beneath his bed. Then, God help him, inside the mattress. He felt the springs quiver, the sheets pulled taut. He stopped sleeping. His skin grew pale, his eyes ringed with purple shadows. At school, he nodded off at his desk, waking to the sound of faint giggles that weren't really there. The teacher asked if everything was all right at home. He lied, because how do you tell anyone that your grandmother's doll is haunting you? One evening, desperate, he tried to throw it away. He crept into the attic, dragged the box down the ladder, and carried it out to the trash. He left it at the curb, heart hammering. But when he woke the next morning, it was back, sitting neatly on his pillow, its glass eyes inches from his own. That was the night Daniel stopped doubting. Something had followed him home from his grandmother's grave. and it was wearing porcelain skin. The storm howled like the sky itself was tearing apart. Rain lashed the windows, and every bolt of lightning carved Daniel's room into frozen snapshots of terror. Shadows leapt across the walls, monstrous in their shapes. But none more terrifying than the one perched at the foot of his bed. The doll. Its porcelain face gleamed white in the lightning's flash, its cracked smile wider than he remembered. And then he heard her voice. His grandmother's voice, seeping from those painted lips. "Stay forever, Daniel." The sound wasn't warm, it wasn't kind, it was wet and jagged, like words scraped out through a throat packed with smoke and glass. Daniel froze, every nerve locked. The doll's head tilted, its jaw creaking as though rusty hinges held it together. Then, impossibly, it moved. One stiff arm lurched forward, the hand curling in a beckoning gesture. "Stay forever." Daniel stumbled backward, his heels slamming against the wall. The smell of lavender filled the room, but now it was rotten, heavy, thick like perfume poured into spoiled milk. He gagged on it, eyes watering. Another bolt of lightning cracked, and for the first time, he saw the doll standing. Its little legs bent, jerky, the sound of porcelain grinding against itself as it shuffled closer. The glass eyes caught the light, empty yet knowing. "Grandma?" The word broke from his throat, half a sob, half a prayer. "Stay." The voice dropped, deep and guttural, no longer just hers, but something else riding inside it. Something older, hungrier, forever. The air grew icy, his breath fogging as the doll climbed onto his bed. He felt the weight press the mattress, unnatural for something so small. Its tiny hands reached for his chest, the place where the claw mark still burned under his skin. Instinct overrode grief. He bolted upright, knocking the doll aside, and ran for the drawer of his father's desk. His fingers shook violently as he clawed out the box of matches. Behind him, the soft thud of porcelain feet hitting the floor, the scrape of something moving faster than it should. He struck a match. The sulfur hiss filled the silence like a scream. "Stay forever, Daniel." The doll's whisper coiled around him, almost tender now, like a mother soothing her child. Its smile seemed to stretch wider, cracks spreading across its face. Tears blurred his eyes. His chest heaved. For one insane second, he wanted to obey, to let it in, to stop fighting. Maybe then he wouldn't be so alone. But then he remembered the claw marks, the whispers, the nights of terror, and he knew this wasn't her. It never was. He raised the match high, his hand trembling. The flame wavered, casting a wild glow across the doll's cracked features. "Stay forever," it said again, voice softer now, almost pleading. Daniel dropped the flame. The doll's face ignited instantly, fire licking across its yarn hair, its dress shriveling to ash. It shrieked, a sound so piercing it rattled the window panes and tore through his skull. The smell of burning lavender filled the room, sweet and sick, clinging to his throat until he choked. The doll twisted and writhed, arms flailing, its porcelain face melting into a warped grin as it collapsed in on itself. The voice howled once more, splitting into many, a chorus of agony, and then silence. Daniel stood frozen, watching as the ashes curled on the floor. His hands still clutched the spent match, his breath ragged, his heart pounding like it wanted to escape his chest. But even as the last ember faded, the smell of smoke lingered, heavy, permanent. And Daniel realized the fire hadn't burned everything away. Something was still here, watching, waiting. The doll shrieked as fire ate through lace and cloth, the room filled with a stench, burning hair, scorched fabric, something far older and fouler than dust. Daniel stumbled back against the wall, shielding his face as sparks spat across the floorboards. His ears rang with that unholy scream, a sound that didn't just die when the flames snuffed it out, but seemed to burrow into his bones. The door crashed open. His parents stood frozen in the doorway, faces pale in the lightning glow. For a heartbeat, they didn't move, only stared at their son kneeling on the floor, tears streaking his cheeks, the charred remnants of the doll smoking beside him. His mother rushed forward, pulling him into her arms. "Daniel!" Her voice cracked with a panic she'd never shown before. She pressed his head against her chest, rocking him as though he were still a toddler. His father hovered at the threshold, eyes darting between the blackened porcelain fragments and the open box of matches in Daniel's trembling hand. "What did you do?" His father's voice was tight, almost accusing, though beneath it ran a current of fear. Not for the fire, not for the mess. Fear of something neither parent dared name. Daniel wanted to explain, to tell them what he'd seen, what he'd heard, the way the doll's lips moved, the voice that wasn't just his grandmother's, but something darker that wore her memory like a mask. But when he opened his mouth, the words stuck. Smoke filled his throat. Or maybe it wasn't smoke at all. In the days that followed, they buried the ashes in the backyard, beneath the twisted oak tree where his grandmother used to sit. His mother whispered a prayer as she patted the dirt flat, her hands shaking the entire time. His father refused to speak of it again. The house settled into silence, but it was a silence that wasn't peace. It was the kind that waits. Daniel's nights didn't return to normal. He woke sweating, clutching at his chest, certain something was pressing down on him. The claw marks never healed right. Even now, faint ridges of scar tissue ran across his skin like a brand, a reminder, a claim. At school, kids pointed at the scars peeking through the collar of his shirt. He made up stories, a dog, an accident, a fall. But when the classroom grew quiet, when the teacher's chalk scraped the board, Daniel sometimes swore he heard her again. That whisper, that promise, stay forever. His parents tiptoed around him after that. His mother stared at him too long when she thought he wasn't looking. His father drank more at night, the clink of glass louder than it had ever been. The house itself seemed smaller, its corners darker, as though shadows clung tighter now that the doll was gone. And always, that smell lingered. Not strong, but faint enough to taunt him. Smoke, lavender, and something bitter that clung to the back of his throat. Daniel tried to convince himself he'd ended it, that he'd broken the thing's hold. But late at night, when the house sighed and the wind rattled the windows, he would close his eyes and feel it again. That same cold presence sitting quietly in the corner of his room, waiting. Daniel grew up, but he never grew free. Time moved forward the way it always does, but it carried the stink of smoke with it. New houses, new cities, new schools, it didn't matter. The smell always found him, faint like someone striking a match in another room. He told himself it was in his head. Trauma, memory, something a good therapist could explain away. But no doctor, no prayer, no distance ever erased it. Hotels he checked into alone, college dorms crowded with strangers, even the sterile apartment he rented years later when he finally moved out on his own. All of them carried the same faint perfume, lavender and smoke. He tried to live like everyone else. He studied, he dated, he even laughed sometimes, but it always came back. At night, he dreamed of porcelain cracking, of little glass eyes winking in the shadows. Sometimes the dreams were quiet, like the doll was waiting. Other times, they roared with fire, the shriek he thought he'd silenced long ago tearing through his skull. Daniel changed. He became cautious, jumpy, a man who scanned every room twice before shutting off the light. Friends called him intense. Girlfriends said he was distant. He never explained why. How do you confess that a piece of your past still follows you like a shadow that doesn't belong to you? One night, years later, he woke in his apartment to find claw marks fresh and red across his chest. They weren't deep, but they were there. He sat frozen in the dark, his sheets twisted around him, the smell of burning fabric thick in his nostrils. And then he heard it, her voice, his grandmother's. Sweet at first, just as he remembered. Danny, but then it shifted. Rough, hungry, stay forever. He turned his head slowly, heart hammering so hard he thought it would shatter his ribs. In the far corner of the room, the dark was thicker than it should have been. And in that darkness, two glass eyes gleamed. Daniel squeezed his eyes shut. When he opened them again, the corner was empty. But the smell was stronger than ever, pressing down on him like invisible hands. He realized then the fire had never saved him. It hadn't destroyed the thing, it had only freed it. And from that night forward, Daniel knew the truth. He wouldn't escape. Not in this house, not in another, not in this lifetime. Because some promises echo louder than the grave, and some whispers never stop. Stay forever. That's the story of the Ragged Doll. If this chilling tale gripped you, help me out by liking the video. It makes a huge difference in growing this channel and getting these stories in front of more people. Don't forget to subscribe for daily spine-tingling content and share this with someone who loves a good scare. Thank you for listening and watching. There's another story recommended on your screen right now. Click it and I'll see you back here tomorrow. The Ragged Doll. Let me tell you something you won't believe. Every small town has a secret, but sometimes it's not the town you need to fear. It's what sits quietly in the corner of your own room. There was a boy named Daniel, 9 years old, thin as a reed, with hair that always looked like he just rolled out of bed. His world had already been broken once. His grandmother, the only person who ever made him feel seen, had passed away. The house felt emptier than a church after midnight. His parents went through the motions of grief. Casseroles from neighbors, hushed voices in the kitchen, the quiet clink of glasses at night when they thought he was asleep. But Daniel's grief was a thing that refused to stay polite. It gnawed at him, restless and raw. All he had left of her was a doll. Not just any doll, a porcelain-faced thing, too heavy for a child to carry around, with raggedy yarn hair that stuck out in tufts and glass eyes that seemed to catch the light in ways no eyes should. It was the kind of toy no kid in their right mind would love. But Daniel did, because it smelled faintly of her lavender perfume. It reminded him of her lap, her soft humming, her hands smoothing his hair when nightmares made him cry. He tucked the doll into bed with him. He whispered secrets to it, promises he was too young to understand. "I'll never forget you. I'll never let you go." And though he told himself he was talking to the doll, deep down he knew he was talking to her. But here's the thing people never tell you about grief. It doesn't just keep memories alive. Sometimes it invites something else in, something hungry. At first, it was small things. Daniel swore the doll's head tilted a little more toward him than he remembered, or that when he left it on the chair, he'd come back to find it on the dresser. His parents told him he was sleepwalking. They laughed it off, the way adults laugh when they don't want to think too hard about what a child is saying. But Daniel noticed. He noticed how cold the room felt at night, how the doll's eyes, those glass marbles, didn't just shine but seemed to follow. And when the wind rattled the windows, he thought he heard something beneath the sound, low and hushed, like his grandmother's voice murmuring his name. And in that moment, the boy began to wonder if holding on to her had been a mistake. Because some things hold on tighter than you think. At first, it was just whispers in the dark, a sigh that didn't belong in an empty room. Daniel swore he saw the doll's head turn when no one was watching. His parents? They laughed it off. But the whispers grew louder. Sometimes he'd wake up and the doll wasn't where he left it. Once it sat at the edge of his bed, staring, its porcelain hand raised as if it had been reaching for him. He told himself he was imagining things. Kids do that, right? Right until the night he woke screaming. 3 fresh claw marks etched across his chest. His parents stopped laughing then. They rushed him to the bathroom, his father holding him tight while his mother dabbed at the blood with shaking hands. "Must have been the cat," his father muttered, though they didn't own one. "He scratched himself in his sleep," his mother whispered, though the marks were too deep, too deliberate. That night, they moved the doll out of Daniel's room. His mother tucked it into a box in the attic, as if walls and rafters could hold whatever clung to it. Daniel tried to sleep without it, but the house changed. The air grew heavy, like wet cloth pressed to his face. And the whispers didn't stop. If anything, they multiplied. "Danny," a voice breathed from the corner. He hid under the blanket, praying it would muffle the sound. His grandmother's perfume hung thick in the air, sharp and cloying, as though someone had spilled the bottle right beside him. The next morning, he found footprints on the floor, not his, small, delicate, smudges of soot leading from the attic door to his bed. When he told his parents, they exchanged worried looks. His father muttered about psychiatrists. His mother wept silently at the sink. Neither wanted to check the attic. Neither wanted to touch the box again. Daniel was left alone with it. Every night, the whispers grew bolder, the voice clearer. It wasn't just his name anymore, it was sentences, promises. "Please, don't leave me. Stay forever." Then came the scratching, first against the walls, then beneath his bed. Then, God help him, inside the mattress. He felt the springs quiver, the sheets pulled taut. He stopped sleeping. His skin grew pale, his eyes ringed with purple shadows. At school, he nodded off at his desk, waking to the sound of faint giggles that weren't really there. The teacher asked if everything was all right at home. He lied, because how do you tell anyone that your grandmother's doll is haunting you? One evening, desperate, he tried to throw it away. He crept into the attic, dragged the box down the ladder, and carried it out to the trash. He left it at the curb, heart hammering. But when he woke the next morning, it was back, sitting neatly on his pillow, its glass eyes inches from his own. That was the night Daniel stopped doubting. Something had followed him home from his grandmother's grave, and it was wearing porcelain skin. The storm howled like the sky itself was tearing apart. Rain lashed the windows, and every bolt of lightning carved Daniel's room into frozen snapshots of terror. Shadows leapt across the walls, monstrous in their shapes, but none more terrifying than the one perched at the foot of his bed, the doll. Its porcelain face gleamed white in the lightning's flash, its cracked smile wider than he remembered. And then he heard her voice, his grandmother's voice, seeping from those painted lips. "Stay forever, Daniel." The sound wasn't warm, it wasn't kind, it was wet and jagged, like words scraped out through a throat packed with smoke and glass. Daniel froze, every nerve locked. The doll's head tilted, its jaw creaking as though rusty hinges held it together. Then, impossibly, it moved. One stiff arm lurched forward, the hand curling in a beckoning gesture. "Stay forever." Daniel stumbled backward, his heels slamming against the wall. The smell of lavender filled the room, but now it was rotten, heavy, thick like perfume poured into spoiled milk. He gagged on it, eyes watering. Another bolt of lightning cracked, and for the first time, he saw the doll standing. Its little legs bent, jerky, the sound of porcelain grinding against itself as it shuffled closer. The glass eyes caught the light, empty yet knowing. "Grandma?" The word broke from his throat, half a sob, half a prayer. "Stay." The voice dropped, deep and guttural, no longer just hers, but something else riding inside it. Something older, hungrier, forever. The air grew icy, his breath fogging as the doll climbed onto his bed. He felt the weight press the mattress, unnatural for something so small. Its tiny hands reached for his chest, the place where the claw marks still burned under his skin. Instinct overrode grief. He bolted upright, knocking the doll aside, and ran for the drawer of his father's desk. His fingers shook violently as he clawed out the box of matches. Behind him, the soft thud of porcelain feet hitting the floor, the scrape of something moving faster than it should. He struck a match. The sulfur hiss filled the silence like a scream. "Stay forever, Daniel." The doll's whisper coiled around him, almost tender now, like a mother soothing her child. Its smile seemed to stretch wider, cracks spreading across its face. Tears blurred his eyes. His chest heaved. For one insane second, he wanted to obey, to let it in, to stop fighting. Maybe then he wouldn't be so alone. But then he remembered the claw marks, the whispers, the nights of terror, and he knew this wasn't her. It never was. He raised the match high, his hand trembling. The flame wavered, casting a wild glow across the doll's cracked features. "Stay forever," it said again, voice softer now, almost pleading. Daniel dropped the flame. The doll's face ignited instantly, fire licking across its yarn hair, its dress shriveling to ash. It shrieked, a sound so piercing it rattled the window panes and tore through his skull. The smell of burning lavender filled the room, sweet and sick, clinging to his throat until he choked. The doll twisted and writhed, arms flailing, its porcelain face melting into a warped grin as it collapsed in on itself. The voice howled once more, splitting into many, a chorus of agony, and then silence. Daniel stood frozen, watching as the ashes curled on the floor. His hands still clutched the spent match, his breath ragged, his heart pounding like it wanted to escape his chest. But even as the last ember faded, the smell of smoke lingered, heavy, permanent. And Daniel realized the fire hadn't burned everything away. Something was still here, watching, waiting. The doll shrieked as fire ate through lace and cloth, the room filled with a stench. Burning hair, scorched fabric, something far older and fouler than dust. Daniel stumbled back against the wall, shielding his face as sparks spat across the floorboards. His ears rang with that unholy scream, a sound that didn't just die when the flames snuffed it out, but seemed to burrow into his bones. The door crashed open. His parents stood frozen in the doorway, faces pale in the lightning glow. For a heartbeat, they didn't move, only stared at their son kneeling on the floor, tears streaking his cheeks, the charred remnants of the doll smoking beside him. His mother rushed forward, pulling him into her arms. "Daniel!" Her voice cracked with a panic she'd never shown before. She pressed his head against her chest, rocking him as though he were still a toddler. His father hovered at the threshold, eyes darting between the blackened porcelain fragments and the open box of matches in Daniel's trembling hand. "What did you do?" His father's voice was tight, almost accusing, though beneath it ran a current of fear. Not for the fire, not for the mess. Fear of something neither parent dared name. Daniel wanted to explain, to tell them what he'd seen, what he'd heard, the way the doll's lips moved, the voice that wasn't just his grandmother's, but something darker that wore her memory like a mask. But when he opened his mouth, the words stuck. Smoke filled his throat. Or maybe it wasn't smoke at all. In the days that followed, they buried the ashes in the backyard, beneath the twisted oak tree where his grandmother used to sit. His mother whispered a prayer as she patted the dirt flat, her hands shaking the entire time. His father refused to speak of it again. The house settled into silence, but it was a silence that wasn't peace. It was the kind that waits. Daniel's nights didn't return to normal. He woke sweating, clutching at his chest, certain something was pressing down on him. The claw marks never healed right. Even now, faint ridges of scar tissue ran across his skin like a brand, a reminder, a claim. At school, kids pointed at the scars peeking through the collar of his shirt. He made up stories, a dog, an accident, a fall. But when the classroom grew quiet, when the teacher's chalk scraped the board, Daniel sometimes swore he heard her again. That whisper, that promise, stay forever. His parents tiptoed around him after that. His mother stared at him too long when she thought he wasn't looking. His father drank more at night, the clink of glass louder than it had ever been. The house itself seemed smaller, its corners darker, as though shadows clung tighter now that the doll was gone. And always, that smell lingered. Not strong, but faint enough to taunt him. Smoke, lavender, and something bitter that clung to the back of his throat. Daniel tried to convince himself he'd ended it, that he'd broken the thing's hold. But late at night, when the house sighed and the wind rattled the windows, he would close his eyes and feel it again. That same cold presence sitting quietly in the corner of his room, waiting. Daniel grew up, but he never grew free. Time moved forward the way it always does, but it carried the stink of smoke with it. New houses, new cities, new schools, it didn't matter. The smell always found him, faint like someone striking a match in another room. He told himself it was in his head. Trauma, memory, something a good therapist could explain away. But no doctor, no prayer, no distance ever erased it. Hotels he checked into alone, college dorms crowded with strangers, even the sterile apartment he rented years later when he finally moved out on his own. All of them carried the same faint perfume, lavender and smoke. He tried to live like everyone else. He studied, he dated, he even laughed sometimes, but it always came back. At night, he dreamed of porcelain cracking, of little glass eyes winking in the shadows. Sometimes the dreams were quiet, like the doll was waiting. Other times, they roared with fire, the shriek he thought he'd silenced long ago tearing through his skull. Daniel changed. He became cautious, jumpy, a man who scanned every room twice before shutting off the light. Friends called him intense. Girlfriends said he was distant. He never explained why. How do you confess that a piece of your past still follows you like a shadow that doesn't belong to you? One night, years later, he woke in his apartment to find claw marks fresh and red across his chest. They weren't deep, but they were there. He sat frozen in the dark, his sheets twisted around him, the smell of burning fabric thick in his nostrils. And then he heard it, her voice, his grandmother's. Sweet at first, just as he remembered. Danny, but then it shifted. Rough, hungry, stay forever. He turned his head slowly, heart hammering so hard he thought it would shatter his ribs. In the far corner of the room, the dark was thicker than it should have been. And in that darkness, two glass eyes gleamed. Daniel squeezed his eyes shut. When he opened them again, the corner was empty. But the smell was stronger than ever, pressing down on him like invisible hands. He realized then the fire had never saved him. It hadn't destroyed the thing, it had only freed it. And from that night forward, Daniel knew the truth. He wouldn't escape. Not in this house, not in another. Not in this lifetime, because some promises echo louder than the grave, and some whispers never stop. Stay forever. That's the story of the Ragged Doll. If this chilling tale gripped you, help me out by liking the video. It makes a huge difference in growing this channel and getting these stories in front of more people. Don't forget to subscribe for daily spine-tingling content and share this with someone who loves a good scare. Thank you for listening and watching. There's another story recommended on your screen right now. Click it and I'll see you back here tomorrow. The Playground Echo. You ever notice how empty playgrounds feel different at night? Not quiet, not peaceful, just wrong. Like they're waiting. Emily noticed it too, though she was only 10. An ordinary kid with a messy ponytail, a backpack too heavy for her shoulders, and a way of looking at the world like she expected it to give her secrets. She hated math, loved drawing princesses with crooked crowns, and because her mom worked late shifts at the diner, she was always the last to leave school. Most kids cut across the football field to get home. Not Emily. She wandered down the cracked sidewalk to the old playground at the edge of town. The one adults had forgotten. Rusting swings creaked in the wind, the slide was scarred with graffiti, and the sandpit looked more like a shallow grave than a place for castles. But to Emily, it was magic, a private kingdom. She'd pump her legs on the swings until the chains rattled, imagining she was soaring above the whole town. She'd sit on the merry-go-round, spinning herself dizzy until the world blurred into streaks of color. She loved that no one else came there. It made her feel like the queen of something secret. Then one afternoon, while the sun was sinking orange behind the school roof, Emily heard it. A sound she shouldn't have. Laughter. Not the faint echo of a passing kid. Not the muffled chatter of houses in the distance. No, this was close. Bright, childish laughter bouncing off the monkey bars. The kind of laugh that makes your stomach jump because you know you're supposed to be alone. Emily stopped swinging. The chains squealed as she dragged her feet against the gravel. She turned. Empty. Not even a squirrel. And here's the part that chills me every time I think about it. Instead of running, instead of screaming, Emily smiled. Because she thought maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone anymore. Maybe another kid had found her kingdom. She cupped her hands to her mouth. Hello? Silence. Then, faint but sharper this time, another giggle. Emily's pulse quickened. Her eyes darted to the sandpit. For a second, she swore she saw the grains shifting, like something underneath was breathing. But when she blinked, the sand lay still. She shook it off, convinced it was her imagination. And yet, deep down, where the truth always hides, Emily knew this playground wasn't hers anymore. It had been waiting for her. The laughter didn't stop. It came back every day. Sometimes when Emily was on the swings, sometimes when she crouched by the broken seesaw, sometimes when she just walked past the gate. At first, it was playful, like a hidden friend daring her to join a game. But each time it returned, it grew sharper, louder, warped like someone dragging nails across vinyl. And then it changed. One afternoon, mid-swing, the laughter cracked like glass. It splintered into screams. Not the shriek of a kid scared by a bug. No, this was raw, drowning terror. The kind of scream that makes your chest ache just hearing it. Emily jumped off the swing so hard her knees scraped open on the gravel. She told her friends the next morning at school, but they rolled their eyes. It's just the wind, they said. You're trying to creep us out. Her mother didn't even look up from the sink when Emily tried explaining. Stop making up stories, Em. That playground's been empty for years. But Emily knew better, because the playground wasn't empty. The proof came in the sandpit. It started small. One morning, she found a perfect handprint pressed into the sand. Not hers. It was too tiny, with fingers thin and sharp like sticks. The next day, there were 2. The day after, 3. And always freshly pressed, as though someone had been playing there just minutes before. Her stomach turned cold each time. But something in her, curiosity, stubbornness, maybe even loneliness, kept her coming back. She wanted to believe there was another child out there, waiting for her to notice. One evening, as the sky burned red and the streetlights flickered on, Emily saw it. The sandpit moved. Not like a breeze ruffling the surface, but like something alive shifting beneath it. She froze, her nails digging into the metal swing chain. The sand swelled up, cracked, then sank again. And from that hollow, she saw him. A boy, or what used to be one. His body half buried, his pale skin coated in grit. His chest heaved like he was still trying to breathe. His mouth opened wide, coughing, choking on the dirt that kept spilling into him. But it was his eyes that rooted her in place, wide, glassy, locked on hers, begging, accusing. Emily's throat tore with a scream. She stumbled back, nearly tripping over the swing frame before sprinting all the way home. She slammed the door, heart pounding so violently she thought it might burst. That night she barely slept. The image of the boy's eyes burned behind her lids. But here's the thing about kids. They're braver than they should be and dumber than they realize. The next day when school let out, Emily went back. Because fear isn't always enough to keep you away. She wanted to know, needed to know. What does he want from me? It happened on a Friday night. The air was heavy, swollen with the kind of silence that presses down on your chest. Emily had begged her friends to come with her. She needed someone, anyone to see it, to prove she wasn't making it all up. They followed reluctantly, shoving hands into their hoodie pockets, kicking rocks, pretending not to be scared. The swings creaked in the dark. The chains groaned like they were straining against something invisible. Emily sat, her palms slick with sweat, her heart thumping like a drum in her throat. And then it came. The laughter, not distant this time, not echoing, but right there, right beside her ear. The kind of sound that makes your blood ice cold because you know no one should be that close. She jerked her head and froze. The sandpit was boiling, rising and falling like waves. And then he crawled out. The boy. His skin was gray, slick with grime. His hair dripped, though the sand beneath him was bone dry. Wetness clung to him. Beads of water sliding down his face as if he'd just been pulled from a river. He gagged, coughed, and a stream of black water poured from his mouth into the sand. Then his eyes, those drowned, glassy eyes, snapped to Emily. He dragged himself forward, his arms bent at impossible angles, his fingers curling into claws. He reached for her ankles. Emily screamed. She kicked, but her shoes passed through him like smoke, then stuck, trapped. She looked down. The ground was opening. The sand, once flat and dead, churned like quicksand. It sucked at her sneakers, pulling her down inch by inch. She clawed at the swing chains, her arms shaking, but the sand was greedy, relentless. Her friends? They stood frozen, their faces pale, their mouths open, their voices stolen by terror. They wanted to help. She could see it in their eyes, but none of them moved. "Help me!" Emily shrieked, her voice cracking. But the sand only pulled harder, swallowing her calves, then her knees. The boy's grin widened, sand pouring from the gaps in his teeth. His voice came out jagged, broken, like water bubbling through pipes. "Stay with me." Emily thrashed, her nails ripping against the swing's rusted metal. She kicked again, but the boy's fingers clamped tighter around her legs. The sand was up to her waist now, thick and suffocating. She gasped, chest heaving, her lungs burning as grit filled the air. Her friends finally moved. One reached forward, but too late. The sandpit roared. Emily's body jerked downward, yanked with a force too strong for anything human. The last thing she tasted was grit grinding against her teeth, choking her throat. The last thing she heard was his laughter, warped and wet, muffled by dirt pressing into her ears. And then, blackness. Emily woke in her bed. The sheets were damp, clinging to her skin. Her mom's voice floated from the kitchen, humming along with the radio, pans clattering, the smell of frying onions filling the air. Normal, ordinary, safe. Her friends were there too, sitting stiffly in the living room when she stumbled out, pale and trembling. They swore it had been a nightmare. They swore nothing had touched her. One even laughed nervously, insisting they'd just imagined the whole thing. Kids making up ghost stories in the dark. But Emily knew better, because when she coughed into her hand, grains of sand spilled onto her palm, tiny, glittering specks, still wet. Her throat burned like she had swallowed the entire playground. She turned the tap on, gulped water straight from the faucet until her stomach hurt. But the scratch never faded. At school, she tried to keep her distance from the others. Their voices blurred into background noise, but their eyes, she saw how they darted toward her when they thought she wasn't looking. She saw the way they whispered. They were scared, not of the playground, not of the boy, but of her. And she couldn't blame them, because every mirror told the truth. When she leaned over the sink in the bathroom, brushing her teeth until her gums bled, she saw shadows moving behind her, shadows that didn't belong to her. Thin arms, clawing fingers, shapes writhing just out of focus. She'd spin around, toothbrush clattering to the tile, but there was never anyone there. Just the creak of the pipes, just the quiet hum of the fluorescent light. At night, she dreamed so vivid she woke gasping, her pillow damp with tears and sweat. In the dreams, the boy's drowned eyes followed her everywhere, through school hallways, through the diner where her mom worked, through the safe little bubble of her own bedroom. He didn't speak anymore. He didn't have to. His gaze said it all. You belong to me now. And worse, sometimes she laughed in her sleep. Her mom said so. Little bursts of giggles that slipped from her throat in the dead of night. Laughter that sounded too much like his. She avoided the playground. She crossed the street when she had to walk past it, her eyes locked on the cracked sidewalk, her pace quickening until her chest hurt. She tried to stay away, tried to forget. But the thing about places like that, they don't forget you. Every gust of wind carried a sound, sometimes faint, sometimes sharp, a child's laugh. Sometimes she'd glance over her shoulder and swear she saw sand sticking to her shoes, though she hadn't stepped near the pit in weeks. Emily's world was unraveling, and deep down, she realized something terrible. She hadn't escaped the playground at all. It had followed her home. Emily grew up. Time has a way of forcing you forward, even when pieces of you are still stuck in the past. She moved to the city into an apartment with locked gates and bright streetlights that never went out. She married once, divorced once, held jobs, paid bills, smiled for photographs. To everyone else, she was fine, functional, ordinary. But Emily never set foot in a playground again. Not once. If she saw one on her walk home, she crossed the street. If she had to pass by, she'd hold her breath and keep her eyes fixed on the pavement until the metal bars and cracked slides were behind her. Friends teased her about it when she was younger, called it a silly phobia. She laughed along, because what else could she do? But deep down, she knew it wasn't fear. It was survival. Because some nights when the city went quiet, she still heard it, a ripple of laughter carried on the wind. Not playful, not innocent, but jagged, warped, stretching through the air like a voice that had waited too long. And the second it reached her ears, her tongue filled with grit, dry, bitter dirt grinding against her teeth. She never told anyone, not her ex-husband, not her co-workers, not the doctor who once asked about the raw patches at the back of her throat. How could she explain it? How do you tell someone that a ghost has taken up residence inside your lungs? Emily lived with it, day after day, year after year, pretending she was free, even though she knew she wasn't. And here's the truth no one ever saw. Sometimes late at night, she'd catch herself laughing in her sleep, a thin, broken giggle muffled against the pillow. She'd wake with sand clinging to her lips, even though there was no beach, no playground, no reason for it. The boy had never let her go. Now, as an older woman, Emily sits by the window of her city apartment, watching the park across the street. The children run, swing, and shout. Their joy is bright, pure, real. But the moment she hears their laughter, the taste of dirt returns. Her chest tightens, and she wonders, not for the first time, if he's still waiting for someone else to swing alone, waiting for another child to hear the echo. Because the worst part isn't that Emily was taken once. The worst part is knowing she was marked forever, that her survival was just another way for him to spread. So the next time you hear laughter where no one stands, ask yourself, is it memory? Or is he still out there, clawing his way through the sand? If this story sent a shiver down your spine, don't keep it to yourself. Like the video so more people can stumble into this nightmare with you. Subscribe to the channel for daily stories that creep under your skin. And share this one with someone who thinks they've outgrown ghost stories. Thanks for listening, and thanks for watching. Another story is waiting for you on the screen. I'll see you back here tomorrow. Echoes on Main Street. You ever notice how the scariest places aren't the dark forests or the haunted houses? It's the places you know, the places you pass every single day without a second thought. That's what happened to Claire. She wasn't anyone special, just a woman walking home from work the way she always did, past the row of shuttered shops on Main Street. You've seen streets like this, old neon signs half burnt out, mannequins frozen in dusty windows, the kind of silence that makes you hear your own heartbeat. Claire's flaw? She hated silence, couldn't stand it. Always left the TV on at home just so her apartment wouldn't feel empty. But that night, silence was all there was, or so she thought. The pavement glistened under the yellow haze of streetlights, still wet from a storm that had rolled through earlier. The gutters gurgled with runoff, and the air smelled like rust and wet leaves. Claire walked with her head down, clutching her bag tight, her heels making a soft tick-tick-tick against the sidewalk. She knew every crack in that concrete, every boarded window, every crooked lamppost that hummed louder than it should. And yet, something felt different. The silence wasn't empty tonight. It was listening. She could feel it, like the street itself was holding its breath, waiting. Her footsteps echoed, sharp and brittle against the brick storefronts. But here's the thing. Sometimes an echo doesn't come back the way you expect. Sometimes it doesn't come back at all. And on Main Street that night, Claire noticed it. Her footsteps weren't just echoing, they were answering. Would you like me to continue with the rising action next in the same style? Rising action. At first, it was just her footsteps, tap, 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 but then another rhythm, slightly off, like an echo that couldn't keep up. She stopped. The echo didn't. Now, you've probably done this, told yourself it's nothing. The wind, a drunk stumbling home, maybe your imagination. That's what Claire did. She shook it off, hugged her coat tighter, and kept walking. But the steps followed. And then something worse. The sound of her own breath came back to her. Except it wasn't hers anymore. It was deeper, slower. And it whispered, "Don't turn around." Her stomach flipped, heat rising behind her eyes. She wanted to look. God, she wanted to. But the command slid into her like a needle, sharp, paralyzing. She forced her legs to move faster. The street stretched longer than it ever had before. Shops blurred together, signs flickering as if the bulbs were choking on shadows. She tried calling out, "Hello? Who's there?" But her voice felt swallowed, devoured by the night. The echo answered back anyway, her voice twisted, mocking. "Who's there?" Claire broke into a jog. The reflection in the shop window caught her eye. She wasn't alone in it. For the barest flicker, she saw a second figure walking just half a step behind. Its head tilted, neck too long, body stretched thin like taffy in bad light. When she whipped around, the sidewalk was empty. Her chest burned, panic bubbling hot. She pulled out her phone. Dead. No glow, no bars. Just a black mirror staring back. Main Street forked ahead, left toward the safety of her apartment, right into the hollow dark where the old movie theater sat abandoned. Logic said left. Her body turned right, as though something tugged her by invisible strings. And with every step, the whispers grew clearer. Not one voice now, but many. Layered, overlapping. They all sounded like her. Repeating, over and over, "Don't turn around." Do you want me to drive us straight into the climax next, keeping the same spoken cinematic tension? Climax, her whole body froze. Because if you've ever been truly afraid, you know, your mind isn't the one in charge. It's your body, your bones. And her bones screamed, "Run." But the whisper grew louder. Every breath she took, it matched her, word for word. "Don't turn around. Don't turn around." Her pulse hammered in her ears. She wanted to scream, to spin around, to see what was there. But the voice crawled down her neck like ice water. And she believed it. She believed if she turned, something would be waiting. So she ran. Her heels clattered against the pavement, sharp, frantic, splintering the silence. The shops became a blur, shadows peeling away from walls, reaching for her like long fingers. The whispers surged, overlapping, echoing ahead of her now, inside her above. 1,000 Claires, all screaming the same command. Don't. Turn. Around. She stumbled past the old theater. Its boarded doors stood gaping, nailed planks warped and bent like crooked teeth. For one breathless second, she thought she saw movement inside. Rows of seats filled with silhouettes, all craning their heads toward her. Claire's throat closed. The voices pressed harder, a tide rising in her skull. Her vision swam. She had to choose. Keep running blind into the dark or obey the command, never looking back. But here's the thing about fear. It breaks rules. And something inside her, some final spark of defiance, snapped. She stopped. Her breath tore ragged from her chest. Her body shook. Every echo in the street went dead silent, as though the world itself was holding its breath with her. Slowly, against everything in her bones, Claire turned her head and saw herself. Not a reflection, not a shadow, her, standing 10 feet away, same coat, same hair hanging damp from the rain, same wide, terrified eyes. Only this version of Claire was smiling, a grin too wide, too knowing. The other Claire lifted a finger to her lips and whispered in a voice that shook the street, "Your turn." Would you like me to push into the falling action next, where the consequences of this confrontation unravel? Falling action. Her heels clattered against the empty street. Storefronts blurred. She didn't dare look back, didn't dare breathe too loudly. She reached her apartment door with shaking hands, slammed it shut, locked it, chained it. Safe. She told herself that word over and over, safe, and in the silence she laughed, half crazed with relief. Nothing followed her inside, except the laugh, her laugh. It came from the kitchen, from the dark just beyond the doorway, a sound too perfect, too familiar, bouncing back at her like a boomerang she never threw. Claire's chest seized. She grabbed the nearest thing, an umbrella from the stand, and crept forward. Each step felt like wading into a pond where the water kept getting deeper, colder. "Who's there?" she whispered. The voice answered in the exact same cadence. "Who's there?" The light above her flickered, a low buzz like a dying insect. For one horrifying instant, the kitchen doorway reflected her silhouette, but it wasn't synced. It was smiling when she wasn't, tilting its head when hers was still. She stumbled backward, hitting the wall so hard the picture frames rattled. Panic made her vision blur. Her body screamed to run again. But where? Out into the street where the shadows waited? Or stay here, in a home that suddenly wasn't hers anymore? Her phone, dead outside, buzzed to life in her pocket. The screen lit up with a single notification. Missed call, Claire. Her knees nearly gave out. The phone buzzed again, vibrating like it was alive, like it wanted to leap out of her hand. She dropped it. The glow spilled across the floor, and there, stretching out long and thin across the light, was a shadow, a woman's shadow, her shadow. But Claire wasn't moving. The sound of footsteps came from her living room, slow and deliberate, and with each step she felt the floorboards sink, as though the apartment were bending beneath the weight of two people when only one stood there. Her chest heaved, her knuckles whitened on the umbrella. She thought she could hear words in the creak of the boards, a murmur beneath the noise. "Safe," the voice whispered from the dark. "Safe, safe, safe." But it didn't sound like comfort anymore. It sounded like a promise being broken. "Do you want me to take this straight into the denouement, tightening the suspense into a chilling closing beat?" Resolution from the dark corner of her living room, a whisper rose, louder now, right beside her ear. "Good girl." You listened, and Claire realized the echoes hadn't stayed outside. They'd come home with her. Her grip loosened on the umbrella. What good was it now, against something that wore her voice, her skin, her smile? She stared at the shadow still stretching across the glow of her phone, and for the first time, she didn't run. Because maybe that was the trap all along, running. Turning, fighting. Every choice had only pulled her deeper into it. Claire lowered the umbrella, her hands trembling. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. The reply came instantly, soft as a lullaby, to be you. And with that, the light snapped out. Total blackness swallowed the room. But she could still see it, the other Claire, outlined in the dark, her teeth gleaming like polished bone. When the light flickered back on, the apartment looked the same. Neat, quiet, harmless. The phone lay still on the floor, screen dead again. And Claire, she was standing in the kitchen, smiling. Calm, almost peaceful. But if you'd known her before, if you'd ever heard the way she filled her silence with noise, you'd notice the difference right away. She didn't reach for the TV remote, didn't touch her phone. She stood in her apartment, perfectly still, listening. Outside on Main Street, the echoes started again. Tap, tap, tap. A rhythm not quite hers anymore, bleeding out into the night for someone else to find. And if you ever walk that way, if you ever feel the silence pressing in, you'll know Claire's still there, waiting. If this story gripped you tonight, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps this channel grow and make sure more people find these stories. Subscribe for daily content because there's always another shadow waiting to be told. And share this with someone you think would dare walk down Main Street alone. Thanks for listening and for watching. There's another video recommended on your screen right now. Go check it out. I'll see you back here tomorrow. And remember, sometimes the echo isn't yours. The Man by the Streetlight. You ever notice how the world feels different at night? Like the air itself carries weight, pressing down on your shoulders. The shadows don't sit still, they crawl, they stretch, they swallow up the places you thought you knew. A street you've walked 1,000 times by day suddenly feels like foreign ground. That's where we begin. Evan Miller, 16 years old, a kid like any other. He plays trumpet in the school band, stumbles through math tests, laughs too loud at his friends' dumb jokes. He's not a troublemaker. He's not a hero. He's just trying to find out who he is, like every kid at that age. But here's the thing about Evan. He doesn't like the dark. He'll never say it out loud. He'd never survive the teasing, but it's true. Walking home alone after sunset makes his pulse quicken. Every shadow feels like it's hiding something. Every creak of the pavement sounds like it's following him. Tonight, the band ran late. Too many wrong notes, too many corrections. By the time Evan slings his trumpet case over his shoulder, the school's empty and the town is silent. His hometown isn't much. One grocery store, 2 gas stations, a diner that closes at 8. At this hour, it feels abandoned, like the whole world decided to pack up and leave him behind. He cuts down Main Street, the soles of his sneakers tapping against cracked pavement. Houses sit dark, porches empty, windows blind. The night has that kind of stillness that makes you whisper even if you're alone. And up ahead, maybe 30 yards away, there's a streetlight. One of the old ones, tall and crooked, buzzing with electricity that sounds like a dying insect. It flickers on and off, fighting to stay alive. And that's when Evan sees him, a man, tall, motionless, standing directly beneath the light, a wide-brimmed hat pulled low, his face lost in shadow. He doesn't fidget, doesn't shift, doesn't seem to breathe, just stands there like he's been waiting. Evan tells himself it's nothing, just some guy, just another person heading home late. But there's something wrong with the way the man doesn't move. Something wrong with the way the sputtering light seems to bend around him, like it's afraid. Evan swallows hard, tightens his grip on the trumpet case, and keeps walking. But already, deep in his gut, he knows this night won't end like the others. Evan's chest tightens. He tells himself, it's nothing, just some guy. But then he hears it. Footsteps. Behind him, at first faint, almost easy to dismiss, like his imagination filling the silence. But then he hears them again, louder, heavier, steady. Someone's following him. He doesn't want to look, doesn't want to give in to the fear. His throat's dry, palms slick, but he pushes forward, his sneakers slapping the pavement a little faster, a little harder. And still, the footsteps follow. Quicker now. Matching him step for step. His pulse hammers in his ears. Every instinct screams, run. But he's 16. He doesn't want to run. He doesn't want to admit he's scared. Not to himself, not to anyone. So he clenches his jaw, keeps walking, tries to act like nothing's wrong. But no matter how fast he moves, the rhythm stays behind him, always behind, always closing in. Finally, he glances back. The streetlight flickers hard, buzzing like it might burst. And under it, the man in the wide-brimmed hat hasn't moved an inch. Still there, still rooted to the pavement like a statue, watching. So then, who's making the footsteps? Evan spins around, scanning the empty street. Nothing, just darkness pressing in on both sides. Storefronts with their glass eyes shut tight. Houses turned inward, asleep. The sound dies as soon as he turns, like it was never there. But the second he faces forward again, there it is. Footsteps, closer this time. Quick, urgent, his skin prickles. He breaks into a jog, gripping the trumpet case like a weapon he knows he'll never use. His breath comes short, ragged, every inhale too loud in the stillness. And then, another sound, whistling. A low, slow tune, floating through the night air. The kind of sound that doesn't belong on an empty street. It's not cheerful, it's not careless, it's deliberate. Like someone is marking time, waiting for him to break. He stumbles, catches himself, keeps going. The whistling doesn't stop. It follows, always the same few notes, drawn out and hollow. He turns again, desperate, nothing. The street is empty. The man under the light, still frozen, still watching. Evan's breath shudders. His mind scrambles for answers. Maybe someone's messing with him. A prank, a joke. But who? Everyone's home, no one's out this late. The shadows feel alive now, heavy, pressing closer. He can't think straight, can't plan. He just knows he has to get away. Away from the sound, away from the streetlight, away from the figure that won't stop watching him. He bolts, full sprint. His trumpet case bangs against his leg, slowing him down, but he doesn't care. He just runs. The whistling grows louder, the footsteps quicker, and in the corner of his eye, just for a moment, he swears he sees another shadow moving, not behind him, not ahead, but beside him, keeping pace. Evan can't take it anymore. The sound, the shadow, the not knowing, it's tearing him apart. He spins around, chest heaving, fists clenched around the handle of his trumpet case, ready to confront whoever's there. But the street is empty. No man, no footsteps, no whistle, nothing but silence. The flickering streetlight sputters one last time, then goes dark, plunging the road into shadow, and then pound, right behind him. Footsteps explode against the pavement, heavy, hungry, faster than anything human. Evan bolts. Instinct takes over. His legs move before his mind does, sprinting down the block like his life depends on it. Maybe it does. The sound is everywhere now. Footsteps hammering the street, gaining on him, closing the gap with every stride. His heart slams against his ribs. His throat burns raw. He can't think, can't breathe. He just runs. Don't look back. Don't you dare look back. His sneakers slap against the cracked sidewalk, his trumpet case smacking his side with every desperate stride. Shadows whip past him, distorted, too long, too fast. He hears the whistle again, low, mocking, right at his ear. He gasps and nearly stumbles. It's impossible. There's no one beside him, no one in front of him, but the sound is there, brushing against his skin like breath. He pushes harder, vision blurring, lungs tearing themselves apart. His block is up ahead, his house, his porch, salvation. The footsteps thunder behind him, closer, closer, close enough that he swears he feels fingers reaching for his shoulder. He screams, a raw, wordless sound, and throws himself forward, half falling onto his lawn. His knees slam the ground, pain shooting up his legs, but he scrambles back up, fumbling for the keys in his pocket. He can't see straight. His hands are shaking so hard the keys jangle against each other, useless. Behind him, the sound grows louder, closer. The air feels thick, charged, like something's about to swallow him whole. Finally, metal meets lock. He shoves the key in, twists, yanks the door open, and dives inside. The door slams shut, lock clicks, deadbolt slides, and then silence, pure silence. He staggers back from the door, chest heaving, sweat dripping down his forehead. The house is dark, still, untouched. He presses his back against the wall, trying to catch his breath, trying to convince himself it's over, that he made it, that he's safe. But the silence feels wrong, too deep, too heavy. It presses against his ears, ringing until it's almost worse than the footsteps. Evan forces himself to move, step by step, into the living room. He drops the trumpet case on the carpet, hands trembling, heart still racing like it's trying to break free. He listens. Nothing, no footsteps, no whistle, no man. And then a shadow falls across the window, tall, still, wide-brimmed hat, watching. Evan stands there, chest heaving, sweat cooling on his skin. For a long time, he doesn't move, just stares at the door, waiting for another sound, another knock, another footstep. Finally, he creeps toward the peephole, presses his eye against the glass. Empty yard, empty street, nothing. The man under the streetlight is gone. The wide-brimmed hat, the shadow, gone. The sound, too, like it never existed. Evan exhales, shaky, unsteady. His body feels hollow now, drained of everything but nerves. He slides down against the wall, sits there for a long time with his knees pulled up to his chest, listening to the silence until it doesn't feel so suffocating anymore. After a while, he convinces himself it was nothing, just nerves, just shadows. He tells himself the footsteps, the whistle, the figure, it was all in his head. Stress, maybe, an overactive imagination. That's what people say about him, isn't it? Sensitive, jumpy, too much in his own head. He wants to believe it. He has to. So he gets up, moves through the house, locking every window, checking every door twice. He switches on the hall light, lets it spill into the living room until the corners feel less threatening. The trumpet case lies where he dropped it, and for a moment he thinks about picking it up, holding it, like it could protect him. But instead, he leaves it there. By the time he climbs the stairs, his body feels heavy, exhaustion pulling him down. His bedroom is familiar, posters on the wall, clothes scattered across the chair, the faint glow of the alarm clock by his bed. Normal, safe. He strips off his shoes, crawls beneath the covers, and stares at the ceiling. His heart is still racing, but slower now, manageable. He tells himself, "You'll laugh about this in the morning." He repeats it like a mantra. "You'll laugh about it. It was nothing, just shadows and nerves." The house creaks as it settles. Outside, the wind stirs. He closes his eyes, tries to let sleep take him, but it's not easy. Every time he drifts close, he thinks he hears something, a shuffle, a scrape, a breath. He tells himself it's the house, it's the pipes, it's nothing. He buries his face in the pillow, counts backward from 10, and finally, he slips under. Sleep doesn't come easy. It comes jagged, broken, full of half dreams that blur with reality. He dreams of footsteps that follow him down endless streets, of shadows that stretch too long, of a man who never moves but is always there. And somewhere in that thin space between dream and waking, he thinks he hears it again. A whistle, low, slow, deliberate. But when he jerks awake, gasping, his room is silent, empty. The alarm clock glows red in the dark. The wind rattles the glass. Nothing more. Morning will come, and with it, maybe a chance to laugh at it all, if he can. But morning comes. The sun spills across Evan's room, soft and ordinary, like the night before never happened. For a moment, he almost convinces himself it was a dream, just a blur of nerves, shadows, and sleeplessness. He gets dressed, slings his trumpet case over his shoulder, and heads downstairs. The air smells like coffee his mom must have brewed before work. The house feels safe again, normal, until he opens the front door. He steps onto the porch and freezes. Muddy footprints leading up the stairs, one after another pressed deep into the wood. They're big, too big, not sneakers, not work boots. Bare, human. Evan's breath catches in his throat. He follows the trail with his eyes, each print darker than the last, climbing closer, until they don't stop at the door. They stop at his bedroom window, right beneath the glass, the same glass he slept behind all night. And suddenly the silence of the house doesn't feel safe anymore. It feels hollow, like someone's missing, or worse, like someone's still here. Evan stares, skin cold, mind racing, but the question rises up on its own, unshakable, undeniable. If the man never came inside and the steps ended at the glass, what was already waiting on the other side? And that's where we'll leave it tonight. If this story gripped you, take a second right now to hit the like button. It helps the channel grow, and it makes sure more people get pulled into these late night tales. Don't forget to subscribe for daily content, because every day we're building stories that pull you to the edge of your seat. And if you know someone who loves the thrill of the unknown, share this video with them. Thank you for watching. There's another video recommended on your screen right now. I think you'll love it. I'll see you back here tomorrow. Her name was Emily, 19, sophomore at a state college, working late shifts at a coffee shop because tuition doesn't pay itself. Now, here's the thing about Emily. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't the type to go sneaking into graveyards at midnight or dare herself to spend the night in a haunted house. If you asked her friends, they'd say she was the sensible one, the planner, the girl who kept a to-do list taped to the fridge. Her flaw was simpler, practical. She was always in a hurry, always cutting corners, always looking for the shortcut. That night, she was tired, dragging the weight of a 12-hour day, carrying the smell of espresso on her clothes, her sneakers still wet from the storm that had passed through earlier. Her apartment was just 15 minutes away. If she cut through the hollow. You've heard of places like it. Every town has one. A sliver of woods too thin to be a forest, too tangled to be a park, an in-between place. This one ran behind the old textile mill, a building that hadn't seen a paycheck in 50 years. People said the hollow was faster. They also said it was strange, not haunted exactly, not cursed exactly, just wrong. A place where cell signals dropped, where the air always felt a little cooler, where footsteps seemed to echo louder than they should. Folks told stories, kids whispering in locker rooms, drunks at the bar after midnight, strange lights between the trees, a shadow that followed when no one else was there, the sound of breathing, close behind you, even when you were alone. Emily had heard the stories. Everyone had. But stories didn't scare her. What scared her was being late on rent. What scared her was not having time to study before her history exam. Practical fears. Solid ones. The kind you could put your hands around. So when she reached the edge of the path, Rain still dripping from the trees like the woods were weeping, she didn't hesitate. She pulled her backpack strap higher, exhaled, and stepped in. She thought she was saving herself 10 minutes. She thought she was choosing the smart way home. But here's the truth about shortcuts. Sometimes they don't cut the way you think. Sometimes they lead somewhere you were never supposed to go. And the hollow had been waiting for her. At first, it was just quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you think the world forgot to keep spinning. She walked faster, hands stuffed in her jacket, earbuds in, but no music playing. Just habit, just noise. And then she heard it. Not footsteps, not leaves. Laughter, faint, high-pitched, childlike. She froze, looked back. The path behind her was empty, nothing but trees slick with rain. She told herself it was the wind or maybe a stray radio from the houses nearby. That's what people do, isn't it? We invent reasons, build walls of logic because the alternative is unbearable. But the hairs on her arms were standing up. She kept walking. The laughter followed. And then came the whispers. Not just sounds, words. Her name, Lee. Her throat went dry. Her feet moved faster. She didn't want to run. That would feel like admitting something was there. But her stride lengthened, her sneakers slapping the mud. Shadows slid between the trees. Always at the edges of her vision, never straight on. When she turned her head, they darted back, too quick, too fluid. Her chest tightened. She fumbled for her phone, clutching at it like a lifeline. The screen glowed, a fragile rectangle of safety in the dark. She opened her Maps app, though she already knew the way. Anything to keep that light alive. But as the whispers grew louder, as the giggles sharpened into something jagged, her phone flickered. Died. Black screen. God, no. Her voice cracked, sounding too loud, too alone. She shoved the phone in her pocket, pushed forward. The path felt longer now, stretched thin like taffy. She should have been halfway through already. But the trees looked the same, dark, wet, endless, like she was walking in place. The whispers came again, louder, closer. This time they weren't just calling her name. They were chanting it, in a rhythm, in unison. Emily, Emily, Emily. Her heart hammered. She broke into a run, her breath tearing out of her in bursts. Mud splashed up her jeans, branches clawed at her jacket, and then something moved ahead, not behind, not beside, ahead on the path, a shape, small, still, blocking the way. She skidded to a halt, breath ragged, squinted into the dim glow of the moon slipping through branches. It was a girl, couldn't be more than 8, barefoot, hair hanging in wet ropes around her face. Emily opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The little girl tilted her head, slowly, too slowly, and smiled. Behind Emily, the whisper stopped. The silence that followed was worse, much worse, because in silence you hear your own heartbeat. You hear the dread crawling up your spine. Emily took a step back. The girl took a step forward. That was the moment Emily realized. The hollow wasn't empty. It never had been. And now, it wasn't going to let her leave. Now it wasn't whispers anymore. It was shrieking, high-pitched, like children screaming on a playground, except there was no joy in it, just hunger. The shadows weren't hiding anymore. They were running, darting tree to tree, too fast, too thin, too wrong. Emily broke into a sprint. Her lungs burned. Her sneakers slapped against the wet dirt. Her backpack thudded against her shoulders with every step. She could hear them, those voices, chasing, snapping at her heels, gnawing at the edges of her sanity. The shrieks grew louder, so loud it felt like they were inside her skull, reverberating in her bones. And then, light, the end of the path. The street lamps of town glowing through the thinning trees like a lighthouse cutting through storm. Emily's chest leapt. She pushed harder, legs pumping, every muscle screaming. Just a few more yards, just a little further. But the girl, the barefoot girl, was still there, closer now, standing in the middle of the path, smiling that same, too wide smile. Emily veered, tried to dodge left, but the girl moved with her. Quick, instant, like a shadow glued to her motion. The shriek spiked. Branches bent and cracked around her, as if something enormous was forcing its way closer. Emily screamed, raw, animal. She lowered her shoulder and charged. The girl didn't move, didn't flinch. And when Emily hit her, there was nothing, no impact, no body, just cold. A cold so deep it tore the breath right out of her lungs, like plunging into an icy lake in the middle of winter. She stumbled, gasping, arms flailing. The girl was gone. But the path wasn't clear. Because now they were all there. Shapes, dozens, maybe more. Children, but not children. Thin bodies with faces too smooth, eyes too dark. Mouths stretched open in screams that made no sound, and every sound all at once. They stood between her and the light. Emily staggered back, chest heaving. Behind her, the forest was alive with movement, with shrieking. In front of her, the path was blocked, trapped. Her phone. Maybe if she tried again, she yanked it out, thumb pressing the button, praying for even a flicker of life. The screen stayed dead. The children began to move toward her, arms outstretched, not running, not lunging, just drifting forward like water filling a space. Emily's choices shrank to nothing. She could run back into the woods and be swallowed. She could stand here and be taken. Or she could fight. She grabbed a branch from the ground, thick and wet, bark scraping her palm, raised it like a weapon, though her hands shook so badly she could barely hold it. The first child thing reached her, its face inches from hers. Its mouth opened, impossibly wide, and she smelled it then. Rot, damp earth, and something sweet like spoiled fruit. Emily screamed again, this time with fury, and swung the branch with every ounce of strength she had. It connected, splintered. The figure burst apart, not blood, not flesh, just black smoke that hissed as it dissolved into the rain. The others stopped, just for a breath, just long enough for Emily to realize she had crossed a line. She could hurt them, but hurting them meant they would never, ever let her go. Emily exploded out of the hollow like she was breaking the surface of water. Street lamps, car horns, the glow of traffic and fast food signs. Normal life. She stumbled to the curb, bent double, chest heaving, her whole body shaking so hard she thought her bones might rattle apart. People moved past her on the sidewalk, laughing, carrying shopping bags, scrolling on their phones, oblivious. No one else heard the laughter that still echoed in her ears. Her phone buzzed back to life. A dim glow. 3% battery. Just enough. She clutched it like a lifeline, the sound of traffic pulling her back into reality. She thumbed to her messages, desperate for an anchor, for proof that the world she knew still existed. Her best friend, Kayla. She typed fast, fingers trembling. Don't ever cut through the hollow. Promise me. She hit send. The little delivered checkmark appeared, and she wanted to sob with relief. But then, her phone buzzed again. A reply, faster than it should have been. Too late. Emily's stomach dropped. She stared at the screen, her breath stuck in her throat. The message was from Kayla's number. Same contact photo, same thread, but the typing bubble appeared again before she could even think. We're waiting for you. Her hand went cold. She dropped the phone like it burned her, and it clattered on the wet sidewalk. Hey, you okay? A man's voice said. She jerked her head up. A stranger was standing a few feet away, holding a plastic grocery bag, frowning at her like she was some drunk college kid. His concern was normal, ordinary, human. Emily wanted to grab him, shake him, scream, "Don't you see? Don't you hear them?" But she didn't. She just nodded, forced out, "I'm fine," though her voice was paper thin. The man shrugged, walked on. Just like that. Back into his regular Tuesday night. Emily picked up her phone, screen cracked now, battery down to 2%. She shoved it in her pocket. Her legs felt rubbery, but she forced herself to move. One step, then another. The further she got from the hollow, the more the noise of town wrapped around her, cushioning her, hiding the echoes. But her mind wouldn't stop spinning. Had anyone else ever made it out? Was that why the stories were always whispers, half jokes, warnings no one really believed? Did the hollow choose her, or had she chosen it by stepping in? She reached her apartment at last, fumbled her key into the lock. The hallway smelled of microwave dinners and cheap carpet cleaner. Normal. Safe. Inside, she dropped her bag and slid to the floor, back against the door, tears hot on her face. She told herself it was over, that she was fine. But in the silence of her apartment, she could still hear it. That laughter. Faint. Distant, like it had followed her home. And that's when she noticed it. Her coat sleeve. Faint, tiny handprints, smudged in wet dirt. Not one. Not two. Dozens. Running from her wrist all the way up to her shoulder. Emily froze. Her first instinct was to brush at them, rub them out with the heel of her hand, but they didn't smear. They weren't dirt on the surface. They were pressed in. Like something small had gripped her all the way down the path, fingers digging tighter the harder she ran. Her stomach turned. She stripped the coat off and shoved it into the darkest corner of her closet, shutting the door fast. Out of sight, out of mind. But it wasn't that simple, was it? The coat was just fabric. The marks were just stains. And yet, her skin remembered the feeling, invisible fingers brushing her arm, tugging, holding on. Emily never cut through the hollow again. She stuck to the sidewalks, to the long way home, even if it meant 20 minutes in the rain, even if it meant missing her bus. People joked she was paranoid. Friends teased her for clutching her phone like a weapon when she walked at night. She let them laugh. Better their laughter than the laughter she still heard in her head. Because sometimes, when the wind slipped between buildings just right, or when a child laughed on the playground across the street, her chest tightened, and she swore she could hear it. That same sound, faint, far away, but closer than it should be. She told herself she had survived, that she had beaten the hollow, outrun whatever lived in it, but deep down in the dark hours of the night, she knew the truth. You don't beat something like that. You escape it, for now. And you spend the rest of your life wondering if the shortcut is still watching, still waiting. Sometimes Emily dreamed she was back there, standing at the mouth of the path. And in the dream, she didn't turn away. She stepped forward, willingly, and the shadows welcomed her like an old friend. She always woke up gasping, always woke up shaking, always woke up asking herself the same question: what if I never really left? Because once the hollow touches you, once it marks you, it doesn't let go. And maybe, just maybe, it already has her. And that, my friends, is the story of the Hollow Shortcut. If you enjoyed this chilling tale, do me a favor, hit that like button. It helps this channel grow and make sure more people find these stories. Don't forget to subscribe for daily content and share this video with someone who loves a good scare. Thank you so much for listening and watching. There's another video recommended on your screen right now. Go check it out. And as always, I'll see you back here tomorrow. You ever step outside somewhere familiar and it just feels wrong? Like the air's heavier or the dark's thicker than it should be? That's what happened to Eddie. Eddie was 25 and already tired. Not just tired in the way you are after a long shift, but that deeper marrow-sick exhaustion, the kind that makes you stare at your own reflection in the bathroom mirror and wonder how many years you've got left before you look like your old man. He worked nights at the only grocery store in town, a boxy fluorescent coffin squatting at the edge of the highway. Everyone in town called it the market, like it was the only one that ever existed, because in a way, it was. Eddie stocked shelves, cereal, canned soup, chips. 6 nights a week, he hauled cardboard and cut his hands open on box cutters. His life was a loop. Wake up when the world was already cooling down, punch in while families ate dinner, drag himself home at sunrise. He didn't hate the job because it was hard. He hated it because it felt like nothing. Like he could vanish from the aisle between paper towels and dog food and no one would notice. Still, he kept showing up, because that's what you do when you've got rent, car insurance, and no better plan. At 2 a.m, he'd clock out, push through the back door with its buzzing exit sign, and head down the narrow alley that cut behind the store. The alley smelled like old bread and wet cardboard, and the dumpsters hulked against the brick like silent guards. Always the same routine. Step over the broken pallet, skirt past the puddle that never dried, follow the alley to where it opened onto Main Street. Then home, then bed, then repeat. Except one night, it wasn't the same. That night, Eddie pushed through the door and felt it before he saw it. The air out back wasn't the cool, damp bite of a New England autumn. It was heavier, thicker. It clung to him, humid and sour, like breathing through a wet rag. And the dark, Christ, the dark was different. The alley was lit by a single orange bulb bolted above the loading dock, but somehow it didn't touch anything. The puddle at his feet didn't shine. The dumpsters didn't cast shadows. Eddie stood there, half in the doorway, half out, with the warm light of the store at his back, staring into a darkness that seemed to stare right back at him. And though he didn't know why, he thought, something's waiting for me out here. The moment he stepped into the alley, his skin prickled. The shadows clung too long to the brick walls, too black, too thick. He told himself it was just exhaustion. He was used to it, always tired, always on edge. But then he heard it. Not a sound exactly, more like an echo of his own steps. He stopped. The echo stopped. And when he glanced down at the ground, he saw something that made his mouth go dry, his shadow. Only it wasn't quite right. It was darker, stretched longer than the angle of the streetlight allowed. And when Eddie moved just a little shift just to test it, the shadow didn't move with him. Not right away. It hesitated, just a beat, like it was thinking about it. He swallowed, felt his throat click. Get a grip, he muttered under his breath. He forced a laugh, weak and hollow, the kind of laugh you use to convince yourself more than anyone else. Shadows don't think. Shadows don't wait. But his didn't seem to know that. He started walking again, fast this time, boots slapping against wet pavement. The sound echoed sharp against the brick, slap, 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 and beneath it, faint, a second rhythm, off by half a second. The stagger step of something following too close. Don't look, he told himself. Don't you dare. But he looked anyway. His shadow was no longer trailing neat behind him. It was spreading, smearing along the ground like oil spilled from a ruptured drum. Its arms reached just a little too far, fingers stretching long and crooked. Its head tilted at a wrong angle, as though it had grown curious about him. And then it moved, not to match him, not to mimic. It moved on its own, a twitch of the hand, a bend of the knee, slow and deliberate. Eddie froze. The light bulb above the dock flickered, buzzing like an angry wasp. And in that split second of dark, the shadow twitched closer. When the light flared back, its hand was nearly touching his boot. A bolt of panic shot through him. He stumbled backward, heart banging in his chest like a fist against a locked door. His breath puffed white in the cold, but the air smelled wrong, sour and metallic, like a coin held too long in the mouth. Run, his mind screamed. But where? The alley stretched long and narrow, dumpsters on either side like teeth in a jaw. And his shadow, God, it was swelling bigger, blacker, stretching across the walls now, climbing them, crawling. He bolted, boots slipping on slick concrete, arms pumping. His breath came in ragged bursts, and the sound behind him came too, the scraping shuffle of something not bound by flesh or bone. He risked a glance over his shoulder and saw for the first time that the shadow wasn't his anymore. It was something else, and it wanted him. That's when it peeled off the ground. Yeah, peeled, like paper curling in heat. The shadow rose up, flat but somehow alive. Its edges wavered, like smoke trapped between panes of glass. It mirrored him, step for step, but not perfectly. It lagged, then lunged, like it wanted to catch up and pin him under. Eddie bolted. Didn't care how crazy it looked. Didn't care if the cameras above the loading dock caught him sprinting like a lunatic. His sneakers slapped against the wet pavement, lungs burning. He could feel it sliding after him, cold and empty, like a black sheet about to smother his face. The alley stretched longer than it ever had before, impossibly long, as if the bricks themselves were conspiring to keep him inside. He pumped his arms harder, teeth clenched, heart jackhammering against his ribs. His breath scraped raw in his throat. Something hissed behind him. Not a voice exactly, more like the sound of steam escaping from a rusted pipe. He didn't dare look back, didn't dare lose speed. Then, light. He burst out of the alley into the glow of the street lamp, arms flailing, chest heaving. The shadow hit the edge of the light and stopped. It shivered against the boundary like an insect pressed against glass. Then it melted back into the darkness, like it had never been there at all. Eddie staggered to the curb, bent double, gasping. Sweat rolled down his temples despite the chill night air. His hands shook so badly he had to shove them into his jacket pockets to hide it from himself. But the alley behind him didn't shrink into harmlessness. It loomed. The dark hung heavier there, thicker, as though the shadow hadn't gone away at all, just crouched at the threshold, waiting. He couldn't leave it, couldn't just walk home and pretend, because now he knew. That thing back there, it was his shadow once, and now it wasn't. And shadows don't just quit you. He straightened, forcing a breath down into his lungs. His whole body screamed at him to keep walking, to run, to get inside somewhere warm and bright and slam a lock behind him. But something else pulled at him, deeper than fear, deeper than sense. Curiosity. That ugly, sharp-edged curiosity humans have that makes us open doors we know damn well should stay shut. So Eddie took a step back toward the mouth of the alley. Just one. The light at his feet trembled, like the bulb overhead was nervous too. The dark inside the alley seemed to shiver in response. Another step. And then, without warning, the streetlight behind him popped. A hard, brittle snap. The world plunged into black. Something rushed him, cold as ice, fast as smoke. And Eddie, too slow, too stubborn, too curious, felt it slam into him. Not on him, into him. Eddie staggered home, telling himself it was stress, a trick of the eyes, lack of sleep. That's all. He locked every door, pulled the shades tight, left every lamp in his apartment burning like it was Christmas. By morning, he almost believed it hadn't happened. Almost. The sunlight slanted through his blinds, warm and ordinary, and he laughed, shaky but real. Just his brain playing tricks on him. A night shift hallucination. People snapped from lack of sleep all the time. His reflection in the bathroom mirror even seemed to agree. Puffy-eyed, pale, but him, only him. He showered, made coffee. By the time the smell of it filled the apartment, he was already telling himself he'd imagined the whole damn thing. He even chuckled when the neighbor, old Mrs. Daly, banged on his wall with her broom handle and shouted about the lights keeping her up. Normal. Everything was normal. Until he reached for his coffee mug. His hand trembled, not a little, but violently, like a live wire. The mug clattered against the counter, spilling dark liquid across the linoleum. His other hand snapped out fast, too fast, and grabbed it before it could tip completely. The speed shocked him, the strength, and then he noticed his shadow on the kitchen floor, stretched in the early sun. It was him, yes, his profile, his stance. But the head was tilted at that same wrong angle as last night. Bent, curious, like it was watching him, not being him. Eddie stumbled back, heart in his throat. His breath rattled in his chest. A knock at the door made him jump so hard he nearly screamed. It was Paul, another stock boy from the market. A good guy, always quick with a joke about quitting and running off to Boston. Paul looked Eddie up and down, frowning. Jesus, man, you look like hell. You okay? Eddie wanted to say yes, wanted to laugh it off. But then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw it. The shadow on the wall behind him, stretching higher, darker, even though the sun outside was soft and pale. Paul didn't notice. His own shadow lay neat and harmless at his feet. Eddie forced a grin. Didn't sleep much. You know how it is. Paul nodded, shifting awkwardly. Well, listen, boss said the back alley light's out again. Wants me to grab you and fix it tonight, after shift. The words punched the air out of Eddie's lungs. The alley. The dark. That thing. He stammered something. Yeah, sure, later, and shut the door fast. Leaned against it, sweating, the echo of Paul's footsteps retreating down the hall. He knew then it wasn't stress, wasn't a trick of the eyes, because the lamps in his apartment were still burning, every single one. And his shadow? It didn't care. It was moving anyway. The next night, Eddie went back to work. Same routine, same boxes stacked high, the hum of the refrigerators, the smell of bleach and old produce. He told himself he wasn't going to think about it. He'd load the shelves, punch out, and walk home like he'd done 100 times before. But the whole shift, he felt it. That weight. Like a second set of lungs in his chest, breathing when he breathed. Like a heartbeat that wasn't his. 2 o'clock came. He clocked out. The back door buzzed, metal slamming shut behind him. And there it was again, the alley. Same dumpsters, same puddle, same long stretch of dark pressing close. Eddie froze in the doorway, but this time he didn't run. He couldn't. He forced himself under the light just to check. His shadow was there. Only this time, it lagged, just half a second behind his movements. He lifted his arm. It followed, slower. He turned his head. It jerked to catch up, like it wasn't quite his anymore, like it was learning how to be something else. Eddie's breath fogged in the cold, and the thought hit him hard, like a hammer to the chest. It's practicing being him. He stumbled back, his heels skidding against wet pavement. The shadow snapped upright, a beat too fast, too eager, like it wanted to close the gap. Eddie couldn't move, couldn't think. He just stood there, shaking, staring at himself, but not him. And in that thick silence, another thought wormed into his head. Ugly, undeniable. Maybe it wasn't waiting to replace him. Maybe it already had. He looked down at his hands, at the jitter in his fingers, the strength he'd felt that morning, the reflexes too sharp to belong to him. He thought about the way Paul hadn't noticed anything wrong, the way the world had kept turning like normal while Eddie felt hollowed out. And that's when he understood. Whatever came out of the alley that night wasn't following him anymore. It was inside him. Eddie forced a smile into the dark, though his lips trembled. He stepped away from the light, back into shadow, and this time, the shadow didn't hesitate. It welcomed him. So let me ask you, what would you do if your own shadow stopped belonging to you? Would you fight it? Run from it? Pretend it wasn't there? Or would you let it in, like Eddie did? Because maybe, just maybe, it's not your choice. Maybe it's already happened. If that story gave you chills, do me a favor. Hit that like button. It helps the channel grow and make sure more people find these stories. And if you haven't already, subscribe for daily content just like this. Share this video with someone you know who loves a good scare. Thanks for watching, and thanks for listening. There's another video recommended on your screen right now. I think you'll love it. I'll see you back here tomorrow. The Girl with the Umbrella. Let me ask you something. Have you ever walked home at night and felt like someone was behind you? Not close enough to see, just close enough to know. That was Michael's mistake. He ignored that feeling. Michael was a normal guy, 42, an accountant who lived the kind of life where the most dangerous thing was a late tax return. He kept to himself, liked old radio shows, walked the same way home every evening through Maplewood Street, where the sidewalks cracked like old bones and the lampposts flickered like they had secrets. The town was small, sleepy, and harmless. At least that's what people like to tell themselves. Nothing ever happens here. That was the story. But stories lie, don't they? It was raining that night. Not the gentle kind, not the pretty kind. It was the hard, sharp rain that makes you hunch your shoulders and count your steps. The kind that swallows up sound until all you hear is the pounding in your ears and the echo of your own footsteps. That's when Michael noticed her. A girl. Couldn't have been more than 10. Red coat, yellow umbrella, walking just far enough behind him to look like coincidence. He told himself not to look back again, but he did, every few seconds. Every time she was there, steady, her umbrella bobbing like a metronome in the storm. And here's the thing. Michael didn't remember seeing her when he left the office. Didn't remember hearing the soft slap of shoes against wet pavement until Maplewood Street, until the rain grew heavier, until the lights seemed just a little dimmer. Normal towns don't keep secrets. But this one had a girl with a yellow umbrella. And Michael was about to learn why. And Michael crossed the street. She crossed. He slowed down. She slowed down. Every corner he turned, there she was, a little closer, always smiling like she knew a joke he didn't. He told himself, don't look back. Just keep walking. But the thing about fear, it feeds on silence. And with each block, the silence grew louder. By the fourth turn, the smile had changed, wider, like her face didn't know where to stop. Rain dripped from her umbrella, light pattering like footsteps in stereo. Michael's pulse was hammering. He spun around. Hey, what do you want? And that's when it happened. The streetlight above them popped with a hiss, drowning them both in shadow. For a heartbeat, the world went black. When the dim glow of the next lamp took over, she was closer, 10 feet away, too close for comfort. Her umbrella tilted just enough for him to see her eyes. Black. Not the soft brown of a little girl, not even human black. They were deep, empty, like staring down a well that never ends. Michael stumbled back, nearly slipping on the wet pavement. His breath caught in his throat. This isn't funny, he whispered, his voice shaking. The girl didn't answer. She just tilted her head, as if studying him, as if waiting. Michael's rational brain tried to kick in. She's just a kid lost in the rain, that's all. But the other part of his brain, the animal part, the one older than reason, screamed at him to run. So he did. Shoes slapping through puddles, rain clawing at his face, Michael tore down Maplewood, every step screaming for distance. But no matter how fast he ran, he heard it. The tap of little shoes behind him. Tap, tap, tap. Always steady, never out of breath. By the time he reached his block, Michael's chest was on fire. His house, just 20 yards away, stood like a lifeboat. He risked a glance back. The street was empty. No girl. No umbrella. No smile. He laughed, sharp and shaky, pressing a hand to his ribs. Maybe his mind had cracked under the rain, the stress, the silence. That had to be it. But then, a tap. Right behind him, slow and wet. She was gone. No sound, no shadow, no girl, only the umbrella lying open on the wet sidewalk. Michael's throat tightened. He should have left it there in the gutter where it belonged. But people don't always do the smart thing when fear is chewing at them, do they? So he picked it up. The rain stopped the moment his hand closed around the handle. Not slowed, not eased, stopped. The world froze in silence. Drops hung suspended in midair, trembling like glass beads. A car across the street sat in mid-motion, its wipers frozen halfway, driver locked in a blank stare. Even the streetlight's flicker had stilled, like the whole town had paused to watch him. Michael staggered back, the umbrella trembling in his hands. It felt heavy now, heavier than an umbrella had any right to be. His skin burned where it touched the handle, like holding onto a wire alive with current. And then came the voice, soft, childlike, whispering from inside the fabric. You looked at me. Michael's heart jackhammered. He dropped the umbrella, but it didn't fall. It stayed in the air, hovering inches above the wet concrete. Slowly, impossibly, it tilted upright, its yellow canopy glowing like a lantern in the still night. And she stepped out. The girl, only not a girl anymore. Her smile stretched ear to ear, skin too tight, too pale. Her eyes, those endless pits, reached for him. Her small red coat dripped not with rainwater, but with something darker, thicker. Take my hand, she said, though her lips never moved. Michael's legs screamed to run. His mind begged for sense, for reason, for escape. But the world had locked him in place. The only movement left in him was the slow raising of his own trembling hand, because the truth had sunk in, deep, cold, unshakable. This wasn't chance. It wasn't a nightmare. He had been chosen. His fingertips brushed hers, and the world shattered into black. Michael hurried home, slammed the door, locked it twice. He leaned the umbrella by the wall like it was nothing, just a piece of plastic and fabric. But his hands wouldn't stop shaking. He told himself he was tired, stressed, that tomorrow morning it would all make sense. He crawled into bed, listening to the storm fade. Eventually, he slept, but sleep didn't save him. Michael dreamed of her, of those black eyes, bottomless and watching, of her smile cutting wider and wider until her face split apart. He woke gasping, throat raw from a scream he didn't remember letting out. The house was quiet, too quiet, and then he heard it. Tap, tap, tap from downstairs. His stomach lurched. He sat up, listening. Maybe it was the pipes, maybe it was a branch scraping the, but deep down he already knew. The umbrella. Michael crept down the stairs, barefoot, heart thundering. The hall stretched longer than it should have, shadows shifting against the walls. He reached the entryway, and there it was. The umbrella wasn't leaning anymore. It was open, standing perfectly upright on its own, dripping water onto the floor. The clock in the living room clicked over to 3 a.m. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Go away, Michael whispered, voice cracking. Leave me alone. The umbrella shuddered, just a little, like it had heard him. Then came the whisper, soft, wet, curling into his ear like smoke. You're mine now. Michael stumbled back, nearly tripping over his own feet. His head spun, lungs clawing for air. He slammed the door to his bedroom, pressed his weight against it, and waited. He waited for footsteps, for a hand scratching at the wood, for her voice again. But nothing came. Just silence. The kind of silence that doesn't end. When the sun finally rose, it felt like a lie, like daylight was only pretending everything was fine. He checked the hall. The umbrella was gone, and in its place, a trail of wet footprints leading deeper into the house. At dawn, sunlight slipped across the floor like something shyly trying to apologize for the night. Michael opened his eyes, and the light didn't warm him. It cut him. It revealed. The umbrella was not by the door. It was in the middle of the living room, open and dripping as if someone had just come in from a storm that had no sky. Water pooled at its ribs and crawled across his wooden floor like a slow, patient animal. The drip echoed in the hollow house. Around his bed, the footprint pattern had multiplied. Small, bare prints, too small for any adult, circled his mattress in a frantic, looping witchcraft. Each circle tighter than the last, like a child's game that had turned into something solemn and unavoidable. There were prints on the pillow, on the windowsill, on the inside of his closet door. Wet toes had walked through the alphabet of his life and left punctuation marks where he once clicked light switches. Michael wanted to cry. He wanted to laugh. He wanted to wake up into normal one more time and find a kettle shrieking on the stove and a dog barking outside and a voicemail from an irritated boss. Instead, he sat on the bed and watched the last curtains of sleep peel away from his mind, revealing a ledger of small, private horrors he could no longer balance. He thought of all the nights he had ignored the little alerts, an audience behind him at the cinema, a slowed footstep on the stair, the unnerving tilt of a streetlight. He had called them superstition, stress, age. He thought of how ordinary people think terrors belong to other towns, other families, other unlucky minutes. He thought of how very wrong that was. The umbrella's canopy flexed once, like a tongue tasting the room. From somewhere in its folds came the faintest laugh, the sound of a bell run slowly underwater. Not cruel, not joyful, just present. Exultant that it had been seen, delighted at a job done. Michael stood up. He could not say he was brave. He could only say he moved. He picked the umbrella up. It was warm now, pulsing under his fingers like a beating, small, private heart. Outside, the rain began, as if called back by the world itself. He did not put the umbrella down. He did not shut the door. He walked to Maplewood Street as the town blinked awake and pretended to tie itself together again. When you walk home at night and you feel someone behind you, don't tell yourself it's nothing. Don't slow down. Don't ignore the smile. Some things are very good at being small until you look straight at them. If you like this story, please hit like to support the channel, subscribe for daily content, and share it with someone who loves a good chill. Thank you for listening and watching. There's another video recommended on your screen now. Click it if you dare. I'll see you back here tomorrow.